Chapter 314, Meeting Together. When Han Li said this, Zhang Wenying beamed with joy and couldn't help but praise Han Li. Liu Jing also revealed a grateful expression. As for Song Ming, he stepped forward and firmly patted Han Li on the shoulder 2 times. With a large smile, he said, "If I hadn't already met you and you were actually unwilling to go, I certainly would have had a falling out with you. However, I already know Junior Marshal Brother is a valiant figure." With that said, Song Ming glared coldly at Wu Xuan. It seemed that Wu Xuan truly did not have a good relationship with his fellow martial brothers. When Wu Xuan saw this, he snorted and said, "Since it is like this, I will find a peaceful place and won't disturb your grand event. I will tell Master everything that happened and hope that he doesn't blame you." Having said this, Wu Xuan expressionlessly walked out of the room and left the Qin residence on his flying magic tool. Sixth Senior Marshal Brother is truly outrageous. He actually ran away as soon as a battle approached. It's unfortunate that he is my Senior Marshal Brother, Zhang Wenying grumbled with great dissatisfaction. Enough. Everyone has their own ambitions, so don't force him. We must make our plans and arrangements as soon as possible. The faster we move, the safer we will be. After all, who knows if the Black Fiend schoolmaster is able to leave seclusion earlier than we originally thought, Liu Jing solemnly added. Senior Marshal Brother has much experience in exterminating degenerate cultivators. You plan it. We will act as you say. In any case, when the time comes, I am fine so long as I take part in the fighting," Song Ming exclaimed with an excited appearance. "Junior Marshal Brother Song Yu." Liu Jing was rendered speechless by Song Ming's complete lack of plans, and was left not knowing whether to laugh or to cry. Zhang Wenying's eyes became crescent-mooned as she smiled sweetly. Han Li also faintly smiled and did not speak. "Seventh Junior Marshal Sister, you are quite familiar with Marshal Senior Huaming's disciple, Junior Marshal Sister Chen. As such, it would be better if you were the one to go. Right now, she is at South Crow City. Please go and request their assistance." After Liu Jing regained his composure, he calmly asked this of Zhang Wenying. "Junior Marshal Sister Chen is also here. I haven't seen her for some time. However, we have quite a good relationship. There should be no question about her assistance," Zhang Wenying replied with complete confidence. When Han Li heard the words Junior Marshal Sister Chen, his heart shook. He thought to himself in confusion, what a coincidence, is it really her? While Han Li was in doubt, he heard Liu Jing say something to him. "Junior Marshal Brother Han, I fear we will have to stay at the Qin residence for a while longer. We will require you to contact the members of the Qin residence and arrange a quiet residence for us, allowing for peaceful cultivation." The third Senior Marshal Brother spoke calmly. Han Li naturally agreed. "Then what should I do?" Song Ming couldn't help but impatiently ask. "You will remain here and properly take care of the Qin residence in case the Black Fiend School suddenly launches an attack. I will go to the streets from time to time and look for any movements from the Black Fiend School. Since Junior Marshal Brother Han has already revealed their faces, it'll be harder for us to find them in public," Liu Ming answered indifferently. "I understand." When he heard this, Song Ming dispiritedly agreed. The following days were extremely peaceful. Apart from Zhang Wenying departing for Nanwu City to request assistance, the others generally remained at the Qin residence and cultivated. As for third Marshal Brother Liu Jing, he went out several times in accordance with his previous words. However, he didn't acquire any useful information. It seemed as if all the Black Fiend School disciples had completely withdrawn themselves and went into hiding. Wu Xuan was staying at an inn in Yuejing. Nobody knew what he wrote in his letter to Li Hueyuan, but once he sent the letter, he casually and leisurely strolled through the bustling, lively parts of Yuejing without any thought of returning to the Qin residence. Nanwu City wasn't very far from Yuejing, so in less than 3 days, Senior Marshal Sister Zhang returned with 3 men and 2 women in tow. Among these was an exceptionally cool and elegant woman whom Han Li recognized to be Junior Marshal Sister Chen Kai-Okian. This caused Han Li's heart to be on edge. When Chen Kai-Okian saw Han Li, she revealed slight shock, but she didn't say anything. Even if they hadn't spoken to one another, she was unable to consider Han Li to be a stranger. The other 3 men and 1 woman were Chen Kai-Okian's fellow apprentices. 2 were at mid-foundation establishment and 2 were at early foundation establishment. When they saw Liu Jing, they appeared very cordial. It seemed they all recognized him. Zhang Wenying introduced Han Li to everyone present as her newly accepted junior apprentice brother. But after hearing Han Li's name, The new arrivals apart from Xianxia Audiobook revealed expressions of amazement. You are Junior Marshal Brother Han. You truly are quite young. We've all heard of Junior Marshal Brother Han's great reputation. A single person at the front lines was able to kill over 10 Foundation establishment cultivators from the Devil Dao. Truly amazing. Xianxia Audiobook's senior apprentice sister shouted with a sweet smile. This beautiful 27-year-old woman appeared to greatly admire Han Li. When these words left her lips, Liu Jing and Zhang Wenyang were greatly shocked. These two had been earlier dispatched on assignments and didn't participate in the second campaign between the Seven Sects and the Devil Dao. Naturally, they hadn't heard of Han Li's great acts in the slightest. Now that they heard their acquaintances say this, they felt greatly shocked. It should be known that although Third Senior Marshal Brother had killed countless degenerate cultivators, he only killed 2 or 3 Foundation establishment cultivators, each time being a bitter and long struggle for victory. However, Han Li had unexpectedly accomplished the great act of killing over 10 such Foundation establishment cultivators, causing these two to feel astonished. They couldn't help but size up this unremarkable Junior Marshal Brother Han once more and feel far more respect toward him. Fourth Senior Marshal Brother, we didn't know about Junior Marshal Brother Han's accomplishments. Could you clearly explain why you never told me this? After she recovered her shock, Zhang Wenyang suddenly thought of something and loudly scolded Song Meng, who was standing to the side, concealing his laughter with his sleeve. It was a rather harsh criticism. Junior Marshal Sister, you never asked me. You only asked about Junior Marshal Brother's cultivation. I believe that Junior Marshal Sister already knew about this, Song Meng proudly huffed. He had long since anticipated seeing the flabbergasted faces of his 2 fellow apprentices upon discovering this. As he expected, it was quite the view. How could Zhang Wenyang not hear the half-heartedness contained in those words? She gave him a fierce glance. Even though she was unwilling to let the matter drop, Liu Jing stepped in and said with a large smile, "Good. I didn't think that Junior Marshal Brother Han was so exceptional. Like this, we should be able to handle the Black Fiend School Master with greater certainty." When he spoke these words, his face appeared overjoyed. However, Han Li felt a chill down his back. With great apprehension, he couldn't help but think to himself, surely this Third Senior Marshal Brother doesn't want to have me duel the Black Fiend School Master by myself. Han Li immediately mocked himself for thinking such a ridiculous thought and threw it to the back of his mind. Following that, Han Li and his Senior Marshal brothers feasted with Junior Marshal Sister Chen and her fellow apprentices. Although they all had similar cultivation bases and could abstain from eating for long periods of time, they were now in the mortal world. Naturally, they would enjoy their present circumstances and satisfy their desire for good food. After they finished eating, Han Li called for Qin resident servants to clean up the feast. The group then started to discuss how to deal with the Black Fiend School and how to charge into the Imperial City. Liu Jing immediately made it clear that he was willing to assume complete responsibility for violating the Seven Sects prohibition. Thus, Junior Marshal Sister Chen and the others were relieved of their misgivings and agreed to go along with them. Based on the intelligence Han Li acquired, apart from the 4 so-called Great Blood Servants, the odds of the other altar masters being present at the Imperial Palace were quite low since they were stationed in various parts of the state of Yue where they managed school affairs. Thus, Liu Jing believed that with their current manpower, they were more than enough to handle the Black Fiend School, but they should nonetheless strike as soon as possible to prevent any future mishaps from emerging. The others that heard this felt this was reasonable and proceeded to cultivate the entire following day as they were weary from travel. On the night of the second day, taking advantage of the mortals' need to sleep, they would infiltrate the Imperial Palace in their plan to purge evil. At this moment, Han Li looked at everyone talking excitedly with a smile on his face, but he couldn't help but sneer in his heart. These people truly believed the Black Fiend School was feeble and weak. How could this possibly end well? After this great battle was concluded, it was hard to say how many of these people would still be left alive. Were it not for the secrets he obtained from the young prince and the usefulness it would have toward his chances of entering core formation in the future, he absolutely wouldn't make such a dangerous charge into the Imperial Palace. After all, he had no grudges against those who used the evil blood sacrifice technique to cultivate. All he had to do was leak information to the victims' clans and friends. In turn, they would take revenge and completely settle this matter. As for the principles of punishing the wicked, exterminating evil, and upholding justice, Han Li had always believed that acting in accordance to one's capabilities was enough. If there was no danger and he wouldn't have to waste too much energy, he would be happy to act. But if his opponents were too strong and they had nothing to do with him, to risk his own life to handle someone else's affairs made absolutely no sense. Although the actions of his sixth senior martial brother Wu Xuan invited loathing from others, they weren't disagreeable. Leaving aside his methods, his decision was truly wise. Else, one may act with hot-blooded passion and recklessly brave terrible dangers. This time, Han Li had forced himself to agree to their charge into the Black Fiend School's nest, violating his own principle of self-preservation. However, Han Li felt that this danger was worth braving. Because Han Li's spiritual roots were truly inferior, so long as there was something he could do to increase his chances of entering core formation, he was unwilling to let such a boon slip by his fingers. Furthermore, he was somewhat certain of his safe return. This is because he had prepared a special trump card that could guarantee his own well-being. Otherwise, with Han Li's meticulous caution, how else could he possibly agree? Chapter 315. Preparations for the Unexpected and Suspicion. In the dead of night, Han Li quietly slipped out of his room without anyone noticing, and then flew by himself in the direction of the Imperial City on his flying magic tool. While standing on the Divine Wind boat, Han Li looked down at a colossal pitch-black object from above, the huge entrance to the Imperial City. He faintly smiled and flew over it. In Han Li's eyes, the Seven Sects' mandate forbidding any disciples from trespassing into the Imperial City simply didn't matter to him. He would only comply with rules that he found to be beneficial to himself. Otherwise, he would be absurdly obeying empty rules that only served to stifle his actions. He had never been someone who strictly obeyed the rules. As Han Li coldly smiled, he had already flown more than 300 meters above the Imperial Palace and was clearly violating the prohibition. Taking advantage of the pitch-black night, Han Li silently surveyed his surroundings, his gaze sweeping across even the most desolate and unremarkable areas. His eyes suddenly brightened, and he flew toward an imperial garden filled with azure bamboo. Arriving above the bamboo forest, Han Li cautiously swept his gaze in every direction. Then he concealed his body's spiritual qi and slowly descended. Han Li clearly understood that, although the Black Fiend School controlled the Imperial Palace, they weren't able to keep an eye on every place. Furthermore, although they had many sentries, with his nameless qi vanishing chant, he didn't have the slightest fear of any Black Fiend School members discovering him. Besides, from what he learned from the young prince, he was very familiar with the usual arrangements of the Black Fiend School's sentries. Even if they revise the sentry placements, so long as he doesn't mindlessly rush into a heavily guarded area, Han Li was completely unworried. This place was clearly a forgotten corner of the Imperial Palace. Not only was the bamboo forest filled with dried branches and rotten leaves, it also faintly released the smell of decay. The branches and leaves were left uncut, causing the forest to appear lush and thriving. Seeing this 5-acre-sized bamboo forest, Han Li revealed a satisfied expression. He cast incantation gestures and released a soundproofing barrier, shrouding the entire bamboo forest. Then, with a solemn expression, he took out a set of formation plates and flags. This was the improved 5 elements reversal formation that Xianxia had given him. Even if the Black Fiend School Master is difficult to deal with this 5 phases reversal formation, we can just take up an invincible position. Han Li looked at the set of magic tools in his hand and muttered this to himself. He then strode into the pitch-black forest with a resolute spirit. 4 hours later, Han Li slowly walked out with an exhausted appearance. Because time was short, he was only able to lay out a small portion of the formation, but it still should be enough. Han Li took a look in every direction, and upon seeing that there was no one there, he released the soundproofing barrier and then flew off on his Divine Wind boat. Han Li had been quiet and hadn't alarmed anyone from the Black Fiend School during the time he infiltrated the Imperial Palace and set up the Great Formation. Although the 4 great blood servants were exceptionally vigilant due to the instructions of the Black Fiend School Master, the situation was as Han Li had predicted. They had only placed dense sentries outside of the Cold Palace, but the other locations were now even more lax than before. This was one of the reasons Han Li was able to leave and enter so easily. When he flew back to the Qin residence, the sky was still dark. Han Li chose to spend the remaining time before daybreak to mediate. When morning came, he walked out of the room and gathered together with the others in the large hall as if nothing had happened. He chatted and joked with the others as normal. Upon discussion of the upcoming great battle, he didn't mention the 5 elements reversal formation in the slightest. In Han Li's mind, the fewer that knew of this prepared life preservation measure, the better. If he didn't end up needing to use this formation in order to achieve a decisive victory, he would be even more happy. This 5 phases reversal formation would remain as his own trump card. Liu Ming and his fellow Yellow Maple Valley sect members naturally didn't know what Han Li was thinking. But when the topic of this night's upcoming great battle was mentioned, everyone revealed eager and excited appearances. Apart from Liu Jing and 2 or 3 others, the rest of them had no experience fighting other Foundation establishment cultivators. This was the main reason why Han Li didn't feel very confident about this operation. Han Li had continuously believed that cultivators that haven't experienced their baptism of blood were certain to have a disastrous end, even when facing experienced opponents with lower cultivation. To make a mistake and lose one's life wasn't a rare occurrence. Thus, when he saw these people happily chat and laugh, his eyes occasionally revealed a strange expression. After all, cultivators that were able to reach Foundation establishment were certain to have faced some hardship to reach where they were today. However, after tonight's battle, these people were likely to be buried there, which was an extremely pitiful thought. Junior Marshal Brother Han, could you accompany me for a moment? Chen Xianxia, who had originally been bantering with Zhang Wenyang, then looked at Han Li's face and suddenly asked him to accompany her. Not only was Han Li amazed by these words, but even Chen Xiaoqian's fellow apprentices were silently gaping in surprise. With a gaze of disbelief, they glanced at Han Li and their young junior martial sister, who had always been cold toward male cultivators. Seeing Han Li's blank, foolish appearance, Zhang Wenyang rolled her eyes. It was unknown what she was thinking before she suddenly went to whisper a few words in Chen Xiaoqian's ear. Suddenly, this junior martial sister Chen blushed, and after giving Zhang Wenyang a fierce look, she walked out of the great hall in a relaxed manner. She appeared to be quietly waiting for Han Li to follow her. Young junior martial brother, what are you spacing out for? Such a beautiful woman as junior martial sister Chen is waiting for you outside. What are you hesitating for? Liu Jing smiled as he walked over and lightly patted Han Li's shoulder, saying this jokingly. Han Li rubbed his nose with all his strength and wanted to bitterly laugh, but for some unknown reason, he couldn't even smile. After dryly laughing a few times, Han Li walked out under the envious gazes of the male cultivators. If he further hesitated, wouldn't that appear as if he were truly lacking in confidence? He felt as if he had nothing to be afraid of. After he walked out of the hall, Chen Xiaoqian was still lost in thought as she looked in the direction of the garden with heart-moving attractiveness. As she heard Han Li's footsteps without turning her head, she coldly said, "Accompany me to the garden. I wish to consult with junior martial brother about a few matters." With that said, Chen Xiaoqian didn't wait for Han Li's reply. She walked on as if she were certain Han Li would agree. Looking at her attractive appearance from behind, Han Li unconsciously wrinkled his brow. After some thought, he silently smiled and walked after her. Have a walk with such a delicate beauty was a truly delightful affair. Han Li was walking several steps behind Chen Xiaoqian, admiring her graceful and ample body. He already felt that this walk was well worth it. Besides, when he thought of his encounter with this great beauty during that year, he felt something unexplainable from his heart. When I and eldest brother saw you that year, we truly believed that your esteemed self's success during the trial of blood and fire was only due to luck. I truly did not think during that year, junior martial brother Han was actually an expert, disguised as a pig to eat a tiger. Not only did you deceive us 2 siblings, but I fear you also kept all the other experts present there in the dark. As Han Li was letting his imagination run wild, Chen Xiaoqian indifferently said this with her back facing him. Han Li had somewhat anticipated these words earlier and didn't express any surprise. Instead, he scratched the back of his head and slightly smiled, saying, "Senior martial sister Chen is quite funny, disguised as a pig to eat a tiger." At the time, this little brother was truly fortunate and had only passed through with luck. When Han Li said this, his face didn't have the slightest hint of strangeness, as if he had spoken the truth. "Junior martial brother Han, you still wish to deceive me even now." Han Li's words seemed to anger Chen Xiaoqian. After her voice grew cold, she suddenly turned around and her bright eyes turned ice cold. Seeing this, Han Li revealed amazement as if he had no idea as to why she was angry. When junior martial sister Chen saw Han Li act this way, she grew even more angry. Fine, I won't further question you about the matters of the trial of blood and fire, but there is one matter that you must sincerely answer. Although her tone grew even colder, her face wore a peculiar expression. What is it? Senior Marshal Sister Chen, do no hesitate to ask me. This one will certainly give a sincere answer. Han Li faintly realized something causing his heart to become restless. However, on the surface he still appeared extremely honest. 7 to 8 years ago, did you encounter anything on the east side of the Taiyu mountain range? When Chen Kaioqian asked this, her cheeks became slightly red, as if she became somewhat shy as she nervously waited for Han Li's reply. 7 to 8 years ago. Han Li lowered his head in contemplation as if he were recalling something. In truth, Han Li's heart was pounding. How after so many years has this person still not given up her thoughts of finding me? Furthermore, her expression is bashful. Could it be she has fallen in love with her savior? Han Li thought, feeling greatly puzzled. This wasn't because Han Li was unromantic. Rather, it was because he didn't have any intentions of having a pair cultivation partner. Although Han Li had a somewhat ordinary interest toward Chen Kaioqian, whenever the question of affection was raised, Han Li would automatically eliminate such thoughts without knowing why. Perhaps this was because of the affectionate scene that year between her and Senior Marshal Brother Lu, caused him to be unable to accept this woman until even now. Chapter 316, Disappearance. No, 7 to 8 years ago, this one was helping Senior Marshal Brother Ma take care of his medicine garden, but wasn't that when the trial of blood and fire take place? Why is Senior Marshal Sister Chen asking this? Han Li calmly replied after he raised his head, wearing a flawless expression of curiosity. Chen Kaioqian's complexion instantly became pale, before momentarily biting her red lips and stiffly saying, "No." Yet, I remember Junior Marshal Brother Han had gone out that year, and the timing matches almost perfectly. Oh, that time I went out was in preparation for the trial of blood and fire, buying a few magic tools and talismans. However, when I went out, I didn't encounter anything out of the ordinary. Han Li calmly denied. Hearing Han Li's words, Chen Kaioqian remained speechless for a long while. She only coldly glanced at Han Li, as if she were truly staring into Han Li's heart. Since it is like this, there is nothing to say. Junior Marshal Brother, you may leave. I wish to be alone in a moment of peace. A trace of heartfelt disappointment appeared on Chen Kaioqian's face. She gently turned her face to the side and said this with a tiresome voice. When Han Li saw this, he sighed. He knew regardless of whether the other party trusted his words, this Senior Marshal Sister Chen would no longer disturb him. With his distant and respectful tone, this Senior Marshal Sister should come to a conclusion. But with her prideful nature, she naturally wouldn't take the initiative to find him again. Senior Marshal Sister, I will take my leave. Han Li saluted, and without the slightest hesitation, he turned around and left the garden. When Han Li could no longer be seen, Chen Kaioqian turned around and looked in the direction of the garden exit with a complicated gaze. She faintly whispered, "If it isn't you, then who is it?" During that year, the only one who went out at the same time and had strength was you, Junior Marshal Brother Han. With that said, she gracefully walked up to blooming peony flower and nimbly picked the lovely flower with her flawless fingers. She put it up to her nose and took a soft whiff. With the fragrant scent of the flower, Chen Kaioqian sunk into a deep state of contemplation. After Han Li left the flower garden, he let out a long sigh. After he shook his head, he quickly returned to the hall with hurried steps. When the others saw Han Li's quick return, they were all a bit startled. However, none of them were so tactless as to take the initiative to ask about the matter. Even when a few people made some jokes about Han Li and Chen Kaioqian, Han Li laughed it away without paying it much mind. His expression wasn't the slightest bit strange. Not long after, Chen Kaioqian returned and sat down next to Zhang Wenying with her normal expression. She continued to whisper with her. When the others saw this, they naturally found it embarrassing to further joke about the two and immediately changed the topic back to the matter of their battle with the Black Fiend School. Time seemed to pass by quickly, and the bright sky quickly darkened. The Yellow Maple Valley cultivators had already returned to their rooms and were making preparations for their upcoming battle. Although they each felt that their party of Foundation Establishment cultivators held a great advantage and that victory should be of no problem, each and every one of them felt very wary. After all, no one wants to carelessly throw their own life away. However, when they thought of the many benefits they would gain from exterminating the Black Fiend School's nest, it was hard for them not to feel excited. After all, such opportunities to surround and annihilate Foundation establishment cultivators without any recourse were incredibly rare. During their vicious fights with the Devil Dao cultivators, their minds would naturally be focused on the struggle of life and death instead. This time, there wouldn't only be one or two Black Fiend School Foundation establishment cultivators. Also, they were certain to have no small amount magic tools and good materials on hand as well. In particular, receiving a share of such spoils was a large reason as to why Junior Marshal Sister Chen's fellow apprentices even agreed to help. Otherwise, who would be willing to risk their life from the mere talk of annihilating a nest of evil cultivators? Han Li returned to his room as well, calmly inspecting the puppets he had on hand. Meanwhile, the four friends of Meng Mountain were standing in front of him, respectfully waiting on him as if he was their leader. After Han Li naturally introduced them to his fellow sect members, the dark-faced old man thought to become closer to these few cultivators and see whether or not he could dredge some benefits. However, regardless of who it was, none of them attached any importance to this dark-faced old chi condensation rogue cultivator. After speaking a few blunt words, these several people sent them away. This caused them to realize that not every Foundation establishment cultivator of the seven great sects were willing to associate with them. Thus, they became increasingly respectful toward Han Li. In this fight against the Black Fiend School, regardless of what happens, you are not required to come. It may be better for you to flee the capital during the night. The puppet beast in Han Li's hand flashed with white light, and then he put it away in his storage bag. After that, he said this with an indifferent expression. But Senior, how could we flee from the battle? The dark-faced old man hastily spoke on behalf of all of them. This isn't a question of fleeing or not. You are all simply incapable of acting. If you were to personally join in, you would only be wasting your lives in vain. Here are some high-grade magic tools. Each of you may take one. Consider them parting gifts from a senior. After Han Li shook his head, he said this with a faint smile. With that said, Han Li then swept his sleeve as several exquisite, glimmering magic tools appeared across the table. It wasn't that Han Li didn't have a surplus of top-grade magic tools on hand. After he had killed so many Foundation establishment cultivators, the number of tools he had received naturally made an astonishing collection. However, Han Li had no intention of handing them over to these people, as high-grade magic tools could be considered a rather good gift to rogue cultivators. He feared that taking out top-grade magical tools, he would provoke their greed from them, and it would be harder to satisfy them in the future. As expected, when the four friends of Meng Mountain saw these magic tools, they all displayed joy as they repeatedly thanked him. They also stated that he shouldn't hesitate to find them at Meng Mountain, as they would be happy to take care of any matters he had in the future. After receiving the promise that he wanted to hear from them, Han Li gave them face by personally sending them off from Yuejing, causing them to be grateful without end. Before they departed, the dark-faced old man suddenly pulled Han Li to the side and carefully said, "Senior, will fifth sister appear at the Black Fiend School?" Senior doesn't need to say anything as his siblings truly understand, but I fear that fourth brother may have already somewhat guessed. Even though we all don't want to open that window in the slightest, fifth sister sank far too deeply. It would also be good if she were to never appear in front of us again. After speaking these heavy words, the old man seemed to have released a heavy burden and respectfully bid Han Li farewell. Han Li waited in place, watching the four friends of Meng Mountain gradually grow farther away as pondered about the meaning of the dark-faced old man's last words. After a quarter hour, Han Li suddenly smiled, before flying back to the city soon after. After he returned to the Qin residence, the sky had already darkened, and the group from Yellow Maple Valley were all waiting in the main hall. However, after entering, he shockingly discovered that his third senior martial brother was unexpectedly absent. Astonished, Han Li couldn't help but ask Song Meng, who was cleaning a blue longsword magic tool, "Fourth senior martial brother, where is third senior martial brother?" Senior martial brother Liu went to go find sixth junior martial brother to persuade him, as our odds for tonight's battle will be far greater if junior martial brother Wu agrees to come. But from how I see it, senior martial brother Liu is just wasting time. If that fellow Wu Xuan wanted to help us, he wouldn't have left in the first place, Song Meng said without raising his head. He went to find sixth senior martial brother. Han Li wrinkled his brow. Just as Han Li wanted to ask a few more particular questions, Liu Jing had returned wearing a queer expression. "Junior martial brother Liu, is your junior martial brother Wu still unwilling to come? If it's like that, then forget about it. Having one less person does not matter, as the 9 of us are more than enough to deal with that Black Fiend school. The oldest male disciple of Junior Marshal Sister Chen's group said without care. If it was like, it would be fine. But the key part of my trip was that I simply couldn't find Junior Marshal Brother Wu, Liu Jing unhurriedly said with a bitter smile. At this moment all of them, including Han Li, had blank stares. How can that be, Senior Marshal Brother Liu? Wasn't that coward staying at a nearby tavern? Could it be possible that he returned to Master early? Zhang Wenying blinked with wide eyes and guessed. No, I already asked the inn's boss about this. After Junior Marshal Brother Wu went out yesterday morning, he never returned. The inn's clothes washer didn't clean anything of his, and nor does it seem he had returned to the sect. Liu Jin shook his head. His words were filled with worry. Hearing this, the others began spiritedly discussing about it, but nobody could figure out what had happened. However, while off to the side, Han Li faintly thought, could it be that Wu Xuan was unlucky and had actually been captured by the Black Fiend school? Perhaps because Liu Jing's thoughts were the same as Han Li's, he made this decisive announcement after gazing at the night sky. Let's put off the matter of Junior Marshal Brother Wu for now. We're setting off. We must be victorious in our fight so that we may thoroughly exterminate the Black Fiend school. Chapter 317, 4 Symbols Formation. As soon as the curtain of night descended, a group of unexpected visitors flew from the sky into the dark imperial city. The group consisted of Han Li and 8 other Yellow Maple Valley cultivators. With their magic tools, they arrived above the pitch-black walls of the Forbidden City. The leader, Liu Jing, glanced at this so-called forbidden area. After a slight moment of hesitation, he extended his arm forward with great heroism. Go! Without hesitation or doubt, Liu Jing resolutely said this before he took the lead and charged in. When the others saw this, they naturally followed closely behind him. The fear toward the 7 sect prohibition had long ago been tossed to the back of their minds. Han Li wasn't at the front of the charge. Instead, he chose to fly at the back of the group and deliberately fell a bit behind. This actually wasn't because of any particular thoughts. Rather, this was because he was silently feeling out the 5 elements reversal great formation he had installed last night. When they arrived several kilometers away from the Imperial Palace, the corner of Han Li's mouth formed a mysterious smile. Excellent, the great formation was still intact, and the spiritual chi mark he secretly placed wasn't damaged in the slightest. This caused Han Li to feel exceptionally happy. After a moment, the 9 of them were hovering above the Imperial Palace as they looked down at the entirety of it. Everyone listen up. For this operation, we will act according to our previously discussed arrangements. Our forces will be divided into 2 groups. The first group will hurry to the current Emperor of Yue's sleeping quarters and rescue him from the hands of the Black Fiend School, and prevent them from taking the state of Yue's Emperor as a hostage out of desperation. The second group will head to the Cold Palace, where the Black Fiend School Master is located, and first focus on killing the 4 great blood servants. Then the 2 teams will regroup before finally subduing the secluded Black Fiend School Master. With a solemn expression, Liu Jing repeated his plans for the night, causing the listeners to repeatedly nod their heads. The members of each team have already been decided. The 2 female cultivators, Chen Kaioking and Zhang Wenying, formed the first group and will be rescuing the Emperor of the state of Yue. Liu Jing and the rest formed the second group and would throw themselves at the 4 great blood servants that were guarding the Cold Palace. Han Li was included among them. 7th Junior Marshal Sister Chen, be very careful. Liu Jing urged them with great concern before they split up. After the 2 women gave a solemn response, they flew down to the side, they silently disappearing into the darkness soon after. From now on, if anyone sees a cultivator, do not hold back. Any cultivators casually moving about in the Imperial Palace are certain to be enemies from the Black Fiend School. We will begin now. Let us create an opportunity for our 2 junior martial sisters. Han Li and the others followed after them. After a short moment, the 7 of them descended from the sky in an arrogantly domineering manner, and were immediately discovered by the Black Fiend School disciples guarding the perimeter of the Cold Palace. After many sharp whistles were blown, countless magic techniques and tools assaulted them from every direction. Even mere specks of light dare to outshine the moon. After Liu Jing grandly raised his hand, a sparkling silk scarf flew out from his hand. In an instant, The scarf had formed a huge barrier that protected Han Li and everyone else behind it from the incoming attacks. It seemed he was truly confident in the power of this magic tool. The moment the silk scarf unfolded, a barrage of magic techniques and tools fell upon it, causing it to release a dazzling white light. Not only was there not the slightest damage on the silk scarf as expected, but a few magic techniques had also been reflected, leaving a few Black Fiend school disciples battered and confused. Senior Marshal Brother Liu, good move. Upon seeing this, Song Meng, who was standing alongside Liu Jing, loudly shouted out in praise. Soon after, he threw away what he was grasping in his hand without any restraint. A huge blue sword then appeared out of thin air. This was Song Meng's favorite top-quality magic tool, the blue-threaded sword. Go! Song Meng formed an incantation gesture with his hands. The huge blue sword then released a long shriek and started spinning itself like a wheel. The sword's great display left the anxious Black Fiend school disciples in shock. When Song Meng saw this, a wicked grin faintly appeared on his face. He pointed two fingers toward the blue-threaded sword that had transformed into a disc. The disc's blue radiance suddenly shrank and then expanded, shooting out countless threads of blue light and enveloping everything underneath it within a range of about 100 meters. The Black Fiend school disciples that saw this felt their souls leaving their bodies from fright. They all activated various defensive magic tools and techniques in an attempt to block this heaven-shrouding attack. Successions of wretched screams could be heard. A majority of Black Fiend school disciples were unable to withstand the penetrating attack of the countless blue threads of light. They either died a miserable death after turning into honeycombs or managed to survive by protecting their vitals. But even then, the injuries they received from the attack would have left them unable to fight. Myriad threads under the heavens. Good move. As expected, Junior Marshal Brother Song's long-famed technique is quite different from the rumors. When one of Chen Kaioqian's senior martial brothers saw the might of this attack, he couldn't help but sincerely praise it. Song Meng's face revealed slight pride in response. At this moment, several people calmly landed at the great entrance of the Cold Palace. Those Black Fiend school disciples that managed to luckily survive had already lost themselves to fear and didn't dare to attack. Start the four symbols formation and trap them within. Just as the remaining Black Fiend school disciples were about to confront their group with fear and trepidation, an incomparably cold voice came from the Cold Palace. A white silhouette releasing a cold and hazy white mist had appeared at the entrance in the blink of an eye. This was the ice demon that happened to be on duty. He was the one who gave those orders from a moment ago, with teeth clenched in anger. Now he was looking at the yellow Maple Valley cultivators in both rage and alarm. Humph, this monster will be taking your lives. When Liu Jing heard those words, he looked at this person's cultivation and immediately realized he was one of the great blood servants. After he coldly snorted, he shot two streaks of silver light straight toward his head. When the others saw this, their magic tools began to shine. They thought to immediately make a united attack against the newly appeared Black Fiend school expert. After all, this wasn't a practice match against fellow sect members. They naturally wouldn't fight alone. Han Li equivalently took out his 6 golden blades from his storage pouch and shot them out. If this attack was enough to kill this blood servant, Han Li would naturally be happy to do it. But before their attacks could land, the scenery before their eyes blurred for a moment and underwent a huge change. Everyone was greatly shocked to discover that, in the blink of an eye, they had suddenly appeared in a world of frost and snow. A vast expanse of whiteness surrounded them with bone-chilling winds, and huge drifting snowflakes filled the entire sky. Where did that white-clothed silhouette go? Although Liu Jing and company were shocked, they knew that they had fallen into the four symbols formation. Thus, after a brief moment of panic, they had all regained their composure. After all, they were Foundation establishment cultivators from the same sect, and had nothing to fear from this minor formation. He, your courage is quite great, actually daring to injure our school's disciples. Properly stay put for the moment in our school's great protection formation. That ice-cold voice sounded as if it came from every direction at the same time, causing a truly astonishing impression. Four symbols formation. Does anyone here comprehend this formation spell? We had best break out quickly, else we will be letting the four great blood servants gather together, and that would prove troublesome. Liu Jing didn't take notice of the ice demon's infuriating words and instead said this to the others with a calm expression. When he said this, the others mutually looked at each other and didn't speak for a short while. I understand a bit of the Tao of formation spells and have heard of this four symbols formation before. However, I didn't particularly study the specific method to break this formation. This formation spell can be considered to be an obscure type. As such, one normally wouldn't study such a formation. Chen Kai-okian's senior martial sister hesitantly said, interrupting the awkward silence. This is a bit troublesome. Could it be we have to use brute force to break the formation? Liu Jing wrinkled his brow and muttered to himself with reluctance. Relying on brute force to break a formation is admittedly a simple and direct method. However, not only was it more time-consuming, but it would also consume a large amount of everyone's magic power, which would naturally put them at a huge disadvantage in the great battle following the destruction of the formation. Perhaps this was the true intention of why the enemy has used this formation. When the others heard this, they looked at each other with worry and dismay. At this moment, a very curious voice spoke out. "Ye Junior Martial Brother Han, what are you doing?" Song Ming didn't understand the slightest bit about formation spells and wasn't troubling himself with thinking about how to break the formation. Instead, he was looking around and actually saw Han Li's actions. Han Li was currently grasping a clear crystal ball magic tool and placed it in front of his eyes. Gazing thought he was staring at a particular direction. This peculiar action strongly piqued Song Ming's curiosity, causing him to ask this without thinking. This question attracted the others' attention, causing them all to look toward Han Li with puzzlement. Han Li put down the crystal ball with an ordinary expression. Then he turned his head toward Liu Jing and said, "I have likely found a gap in the formation." "What, you found a weakness?" Han Li's words caused everyone's face to reveal pleasant surprise. Liu Jing was particularly overjoyed. The four symbols formation, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, refers to the four divisions of the 28 constellations. Azure Dragon, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, White Tiger, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Vermilion Bird, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Black Tortoise, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Chapter 318, Qing Wen's Reappearance. As expected, Han Li is far beyond ordinary, being able to find a hole so quickly. What is its weakness? Liu Jing praised Han Li and amiably asked. Han Li faintly smiled and suddenly handed the crystal ball over. "Senior Martial Brother, look into this violet light orb and you'll understand." Han Li pointed in the direction he had just looked at. When Liu Jing heard this, he took the magic tool with great curiosity and carefully looked into it. After he took a glance, Liu Jing revealed astonishment. After a short moment, he passed the crystal ball back to Han Li and lowered his head, muttering to himself. Another moment passed by before he raised his head and anxiously said to the others, "Han Li's words are true. For some unknown reason, the spiritual chi fluctuations in that direction appears much thinner. It seems that this formation was laid out in a hurry and exposed an unintentional flaw." Liu Jing's voice grew louder as if he were brimming with confidence. "Then what does Senior Martial Brother Liu intend to do?" Chen Kai-okian's senior martial sister couldn't help but ask. "Concentrate all of our attacks at the weak point. I am confident we will be able to break this formation without expending much magic power," Liu Jing said with certainty. "Since it is like that, we should act quickly." When Song Ming heard this, he could no longer wait. He immediately raised his hand and released his blue-threaded sword, causing it to spin above his head. The others wore expressions of eagerness after hearing Liu Jing's words. When Liu Jing saw this, he no longer hesitated and immediately exclaimed, "Good! Let's break through this formation and give our enemies a show." After this was said, over 10 magic tools emitted a dazzling radiance and fiercely shot toward the formation's flaw. Outside of the formation, the ice demon felt extremely anxious while commanding the school disciples to take up an encirclement formation. Ever since the Black Fiend schoolmaster had requested the 4 great blood servants to remain within the palace, they should have been taking turns to guard in pairs. But Zai Shi, who was originally supposed to be on guard with him, had recently reached the great success stage in his cultivation. Using the excuse of wanting to immediately enter mid-foundation establishment, he stealthily ran off to the blood prison to cultivate. As the ice demon was unwilling to offend the brilliant rising talent in the 4 blood servants, he had tacitly turned a blind eye. However, that moment of neglect had left him alone, while guarding the entrance against an invasion of so many strong enemies. However, it was fortunate that he was quick-witted. He first used this 4 divisions formation to trap the enemy, and then dispatched disciples to the blood prison and the rear palace to quickly fetch the other 3 blood servants without delay. He clearly understood that these few chi condensation disciples were no match against these strong enemies. But luckily, the enemy had been trapped within the 4 divisions formation, buying quite a bit of time. So long as he could stall for a bit of time, his 3 comrades would be certain to promptly arrive. With the 4 great blood servants acting together, the ice demon would have nothing to be afraid of. Just as he was thinking this, a loud rumbling vibration could be heard from within the 4 divisions formation. The thick white fog that filled the formation was then fiercely blown away, appearing as if the formation was about to be destroyed. What is this? It is impossible for the 4 symbols formation to break so quickly. Something must have went wrong. When the ice demon saw this, his pale face concealed by the cold chi had turned somewhat green. Sir Ice Demon, the enemies had struck far too quickly. A few of the disciples that were in charge of the formation had died in the attack, causing the 4 symbols formation to be insufficiently manned. It is possible that the enemy saw through the gap. When a nearby Black Fiend school disciple saw this, he carefully gave an explanation. When the ice demon heard this, he became alarmed and furious. Just as he was about to loudly rebuke him, he heard a gentle voice from behind him. Ice demon, what happened? The 4 symbols formation had actually activated, but it appears unable to hold the enemy. When the ice demon heard this, he immediately felt relieved. Qingwen, it's good that you've quickly arrived. The ice demon couldn't conceal his happiness and hastily turned his head to look at him. 1. Han Li previously met Qingwen at the Great South Trade Assembly in Chapter 130. At an unknown time, 2 people had appeared about 15 meters behind him. One of them appeared 30 years old with a beardless and unremarkable face. He was wearing an azure Taoist robe and looked at the 4 symbol formation's strange condition with a solemn expression. Who is invading us, and where is that youngster Zai Shi? Tai Luo stroked his bald head with an expression of bloodlust. Right now, Zai Shi is. A huge rumbling from the 4 symbols formation interrupted the ice demon. The 4 symbols formation's dense fog ruptured and completely disappeared, revealing the silhouettes of Han Li's group. After clearly seeing the number and cultivation of these invaders, Qingwen's complexion slightly darkened, and Tai Luo appeared greatly astonished. Haha, you evil cultivators believed that a broken formation was able to trap us Yellow Maple Valley cultivators. That's just wishful thinking. After Song Meng appeared once more before the cold palace, he couldn't help but loudly yell this with excitement. Yellow Maple Valley. Qingwen and the other 2 were slightly startled. However, after a short moment of thought, they quickly recovered. Apart from the 7 great sects, who else could dispatch so many Foundation establishment cultivators in the state of Yue? Why have you stormed the Imperial Palace in the night? Could it be you are unafraid of violating the prohibition? Without waiting for Liu Jing and company to speak, Qingwen calmly asked. He knew about the 7 sects ban, and hoped he could use this to cause Liu Jing's group to become fearful of the consequences. Liu Jing coldly snorted, and before he could open mouth, he heard an alarmed cry from the bald man. It's you, aren't you from the 1,000 Bamboo School? How are you together with the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators? As the large bald man, Tai Luo, swept his gaze across them, he discovered Han Li among them and couldn't help but loudly ask this with amazement and confusion. These words left both enemies and allies stunned. In a flash, all eyes gathered upon Han Li. At this moment, Taoist priest Qing Wei had clearly recognized Han Li and couldn't help but twitch his face. Disbelief could be seen in his eyes. When have I ever said that I was someone from the 1,000 Bamboo School? Han Li coldly gazed at the large bald man and then turned his glance toward Taoist priest Qing Wen. That year at the Great South meeting, Qing Wen had urged Han Li to travel together with him. Surprisingly, Han Li now found him here. As a result of this, he was able to answer the lingering questions from back then. Namely, why Qingwen made such great efforts to journey together with low-grade cultivators, and why that yellow-clothed man had pursued and attempted to kill Han Li. Now understanding the entire story, Han Li was furious and felt an intense desire to kill Qingwen. Nonsense! If you aren't from the 1,000 Bamboo School, then why can you use puppet techniques? The large bald man retorted, refusing to let the matter drop. Are we required to tell you the techniques that Junior Marshal Brother Han is able to use? Everyone, attack. These people are deliberately stalling for time. Do not fulfill their wishes. Liu Jing's expression darkened before suddenly saying this with a stern voice. With that said, he extended his arm, and a streak of silver light directly attacked the ice demon in front. Upon hearing this, the Yellow Maple Valley disciples suddenly realized and inwardly cursed the enemy's craftiness. They then released their magic tools without restraint and immediately joined the fight. As Han Li had been staring at Taoist priest Qing Wen earlier, he immediately performed a pincer attack with Chen Kaioqian's senior martial brother Wang, in an attempt to trap Qing Wen. Without speaking further, Han Li patted the storage pouch at his waist, causing over 10 streaks of red, black, and golden light to simultaneously soar out. After they hovered above Han Li for a moment, they shot toward the enemy with the sound of a faint explosion. Han Li didn't bother speaking to Qing Wen, as he didn't have the slightest intention to reminisce about old times. When Qing Wen and that senior martial brother Wang saw Han Li's display of immense strength, both of their expressions changed significantly. Senior martial brother Wang revealed pleasant surprise, while inwardly praising Han Li. As expected, Han Li's reputation as an expert that had previously killed many Foundation establishment cultivators was well earned. He is truly outstanding. Taoist priest Qing Wen revealed a cautious appearance and faintly shrouded his body in a layer of azure qi. Upon seeing Han Li's vicious actions, he knew Han Li intended to kill him. Naturally, he wouldn't just wait for death like a sitting duck. In turn, he also didn't speak any rubbish before suddenly extending his hand toward the attacking magic tools. 5 azure bead magic tools flew from his hand and formed a pentagon around him in an instant. Then, with a flash of azure light, Taoist priest Qing Wen was enveloped in a cloud of azure mist as a pentagonal prism barrier appeared around him out of thin air, closely protecting him. Han Li's golden swarm blades, black dragon's grasps, and blazing chain tridents simultaneously struck Qing Wen's pentagonal prism barrier, producing an explosion of blinding light. Bursts of radiance flew in every direction, yet the strange barrier was left unscathed from the attack. Han Li, my Azurewood True Barrier can only be broken by core formation cultivators. Foundation establishment cultivators like yourself aren't able to damage it in the slightest. You had best give up. Qing Wen suddenly said this with a slight smile, speaking to Han Li in a very intimate manner. Chapter 319, The 4 Great Blood Servants. I'm not so sure about that, Han Li coldly sneered. Han Li then formed an incantation gesture with his hands, causing his magic tools that were attacking the azure barrier to loudly howl, before flying into the sky and converging as one. This scene stunned Qing Wen as he didn't know what Han Li intended to do. However, as he was also of the cunning sort, how could he allow Han Li to perform his magic so easily? His hands immediately shined, producing a dazzling golden ring in each hand that released dense cold qi. One could tell from their appearance that the rings were extraordinary. Go! Qing Wen softly yelled as he threw out the rings without the slightest hesitation. They turned into twin golden streaks of light as they directly attacked Han Li. Han Li raised his eyebrows in alarm, and with a menacing expression, he tightly gripped his white scale shield. However, before those magic tools struck their target, 3 green foot-long streaks had suddenly flown in from the side and intercepted the 2 streaks of golden light. Fiendish Taoist, don't tell me you've forgotten about me. Senior martial brother Wang flashed Han Li a friendly smile as he controlled the green streaks of light. When Han Li saw this, he felt relieved and returned the smile. However, Qing Wen wasn't feeling calm like these two. His complexion darkened as his gaze started shifting everywhere. Not long after, he had reached his wits' end. After all, simultaneously controlling the Azurewood True Barrier and Goldlock rings had nearly used up the entirety of his spiritual sense. He was unlike Han Li, who had learned the Great Development technique and was able to smoothly control so many magic tools. Although he possessed a few incisive magic tools, he didn't dare to lightly use them. Using the entirety of one's spiritual sense to control magic tools was very dangerous, as it left the user incapable of paying attention to their surroundings. Furthermore, cultivators being able to control over 10 magic tools simultaneously in an attack was something rarely seen. In part, Han Li was able to do this because these magic tools were created as sets and only used the same amount of magic power as 3 magic tools. If it were truly more than 10 separate top-grade magic tools, even if Han Li's spiritual sense could support it, he wouldn't be able to produce enough magic power to activate them. Supporting about 5 magic tools was the limit of Han Li's magic power. This was why Han Li favored using complete sets of magic tools, as they allowed him to display the full power of the Great Development technique. As for why Han Li was able to control the 8 children blades of the golden beetle swarm blades, it absolutely wasn't because of direct control. He instead completely relied on the mother blade in his hand to control the children blades. Its current power and flexibility was incomparable to before, as it was different as heaven and earth. As Qing Wen was hesitating on what action to take, Han Li had finished casting his technique. Giant sword technique. Han Li said those words with an ice-cold tone. Soon after, the magic tools that were spiraling above Qing Wen released a blinding radiance. In that tricolored radiance, the gold, black, and red streaks had intertwined, forming a huge sword of light that spanned over 30 meters in midair. This giant sword technique was something he had learned from the Azure Essence Sword Technique written compilation, the Golden Page. This was also the only sword controlling technique that he could use with his foundation establishment Cultivation. Naturally, its might was beyond ordinary. Although Qing Wen and senior martial brother Wang were locked in combat with their magic tools, they both revealed expressions of astonishment. Even an idiot could tell just how immensely powerful Han Li's technique was. Qing Wen inwardly complained without end, immediately abandoning the 2 golden rings. Instead, he hurriedly searched himself and took out a shiny brass mirror. At this moment, Han Li pointed at the huge sword of light with an ice-cold expression. The huge sword fiercely chopped down from the sky without sound. The crushing blow was about to break through barrier and man with astonishing grandeur. Upon seeing this, senior martial brother Wang had forgot to take advantage of Qing Wen's moment of distraction to destroy his golden rings. Instead, he was mesmerized while staring at the huge sword's heaven-stunning might. His entire mind was occupied with the thoughts of whether or not he would be able to withstand such a strike. As the target of the attack, Taoist priest Qing Wen's expression grew extremely solemn, and he hastily tossed the brass mirror above him. The brass mirror quickly flew out of the light barrier and flashed, producing a yellow cloud about 3 meters wide above him. In the blink of an eye, it solidified into a huge shield that continuously revolved above him. Han Li's complexion sunk as he formed an incantation gesture with his hand. The huge sword of light thunderously roared and chopped down with even more astonishing might, reaching the brass shield in an instant. Along with the sound of an immense explosion, the shield released an immense yellow radiance. But underneath the huge sword's fierce blow, it was only able to endure for a short moment before releasing a wail as it broke into pieces. With nothing left to stop the sword of light, it chopped down on the azure prism barrier, causing it to groan underneath the huge sword's immense pressure. Seeing the huge sword's astonishing might, Qing Wen's expression finally became panicked. His hands flickered with azure light before he quickly pressed them against opposite sides of the prism barrier. He then did his utmost to pour spiritual power into the azurewood true barrier in an attempt to strengthen its defensive power. The 3-colored light released by the huge sword strained the azure light barrier underneath it, causing the barrier to produce a crackle. With Qing Wen's desperate assistance, the azurewood true barrier managed to withstand the might of the light sword's downward chop. In the following moment, Han Li expedited his magic techniques. He wished to use the huge sword to forcefully break through the light barrier and kill him as revenge for his previous betrayal. On the other side, Qing Wen was madly pouring spiritual power into the light barrier in an attempt to exhaust the sword's strength and save his life. At this moment, senior martial brother Wang finally came to his senses and quickly destroyed the 2 golden rings with ease. He then commanded his 3 streaks of light to strike Qing Wen in a relentless charge, clearly understanding that Han Li was stuck in a deadlock with Qing Wen. So long as he provided even the slightest assistance, he would be the final straw that would tip the scales and overwhelm the enemy, easily killing this formidable opponent. With this, he would be entitled to a significant share of this blood servant's treasure when the time came. With that thought, the fire in his heart became even more fervent. But as senior martial brother Wang was dreaming, Qing Wen's complexion greatly changed, and a streak of yellow light shot toward Qing Wen at the speed of lightning. In the following instant, he had disappeared from his original location, allowing Han Li's tricolored sword of light to strike at the ground and create a large hole 3 meters deep. Senior martial brother Wang's 3 streaks of green light naturally missed its target, causing him to glance in the direction of the yellow streak of light with alarm and anger. As expected, Taoist priest Qing Wen's light barrier appeared nearly 100 meters away. A yellow-clothed youth with a lazy appearance stood by his side. He looked at senior martial brother Wang and said with complete calm, "This person had previously saved my life. Could your esteemed self not kill him off so lightly?" After he said this, he chuckled and continued, looking at Han Li with a smile. "Brother Han, I truly didn't think that we'd one day meet again." Wu Jiaji pays his respects. The unperturbed youth was that young cultivator Wu Jiaji who had attempted to pickpocket Han Li that previous year at the Great South meeting. However, at this moment, his body was faintly emitting a strange yellow light, and his cultivation had reached the early foundation establishment stage. "Jiaji, this person walks an entirely different path from us. Why must you speak so much? Since you've come, all four of us can now fight." Taoist priest Qing Wen retracted his previously thrilled expression and couldn't help but resentfully look at Han Li. When Wu Jiaji heard this, he sighed and didn't speak any further with Han Li. When Qing Wen saw this, he suddenly made two long whistles followed by a short whistle. When Tai Luo and the ice demon heard this, they revealed pleasant surprise. They immediately leapt out of the Yellow Maple Valley's joint attack and flew toward Qing Wen and Wu Jiaji. "What going on? Another one has appeared. This is going to be troublesome." When Liu Jing saw the sudden appearance of Wu Jiaji, he immediately understood the battle's circumstances had shifted and couldn't help but wrinkle his brow. Now that four of these truly unordinary blood servants had gathered together, it was clear to Liu Jing that the situation had become more difficult to deal with. In the previous battle against the two blood servants with his group of 5, they weren't able to even injure one of them. Even with their advantage of numbers, they had only been able to gain the upper hand. With that thought, Liu Jing prudently called out for Han Li and Senior Marshal Brother Wang to stand beside them. As Han Li looked at Wu Jiaji who had just appeared, he felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. During that year, he had quite a favorable impression of that strange, spirited youth. However, gods make fools of men, and now the two had no choice but to fight to the death. Demon transformation. Qing Wen and the other blood servants realized that by relying on ordinary means, they would be unable to win against Han Li's group, as they were outnumbered nearly 2-1. Following Qing Wen's cold declaration, their bodies all released a blood-red radiance. They then transformed into 4 cocoons of blood-red light and began their demon transformation, intending to eliminate Han Li's group in a single move. Han Li met Wu Jiaji at the Great South meeting. At the time, he had attempted to pickpocket him. Chapter 320, Broken Cocoon. When the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators saw this, they were reminded of what Han Li had told them about the blood servants' demonic transformation. They all knew that during their transformation, the blood servants would become easy, stationary targets. Thus, they launched magic tools and techniques, assaulting the 4 cocoons of light without restraint. Naturally, they wouldn't let go of an opportunity like this to subdue the enemy. Unfortunately, as Han Li had said, the light spheres were incredibly hard. Despite the violent storm of attacks, the cocoons remained intact. They didn't appear to be even slightly damaged, causing the faces of the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators to become unsightly. "Everyone, if you have any last resorts, use them. Do not hold back. If you don't use them now, we will be in dire straits when they emerge from their cocoons." With that said, Liu Jing immediately withdrew his magic tools and solemnly took out a golden talisman, pressing it between his 2 hands. He started muttering a mysterious incantation, causing the talisman to radiate with unceasingly dazzling golden light. Although Han Li didn't know what grade that talisman was, he grew alarmed upon seeing it. Since Liu Jing, a mid-foundation establishment cultivator, required an incantation to activate it, it meant that this talisman was no common item. When the others saw this, they looked at each other and then revealed their hidden capabilities. The most eye-catching among them were Song Meng and Chen Kaioqian's senior martial sister. They both took out an inscribed treasure talisman and then immediately sat down to activate them. Blue and gray radiance emitted from their treasure talismans, causing those who looked on to feel envious. Treasure talismans aren't easy to acquire for foundation establishment cultivators, even with the backing of a large clan. Only those who were looked upon with great affection by their seniors would be granted them. Otherwise, with merely their own wealth and status, how could they possibly acquire such a treasure? The others were unwilling to be outdone and made a display of their own. They either strenuously used impressive magic techniques or brought out wondrous magic tools for their attacks. Brilliance immediately filled the sky as their magic tools and techniques were chaotically flourished. Han Li used neither his talisman treasures nor his astonishingly powerful giant sword technique. Instead, he chose to use his most energy-efficient method. With a wave of his hands, several heavy objects fell to the ground in front of him, 4 of his puppet beasts. The puppet beasts opened their ice-cold eyes and their bloodthirsty maws, fiercely shooting out several beams of light in a well-practiced manner. Han Li stood behind them, taking advantage of the situation to restore the magic power used during the previous fight. As he had yet to encounter that Black Fiend schoolmaster, he wasn't willing to use the entirety of his strength and prematurely exhaust his magic power. Han Li intended to preserve his magic power in preparation for any contingencies in the upcoming battle. He had a few more hidden cards, but he wouldn't reveal them until the time came. The appearance of the puppet beasts had somewhat surprised the others, but they immediately went back to focusing on their own matters. After all, the techniques one used and the magic arts one cultivated were one's own secrets. Nobody would be so tactless as to ask about them. Those who knew the origin of the puppet technique would believe that Han Li had acquired it from Li Huiyuan. As a core formation cultivator, it wasn't difficult to imagine that he had killed several thousand bamboo school cultivators and acquired a few of their school's magic arts along the way. Thus, the others only felt at most great curiosity toward Han Li's puppet beasts. At this moment, Liu Jing's golden talisman finished activating. Trembling lightly, it transformed into a streak of golden light before flying toward the blood-red light cocoons. An explosion rang out as a burst of golden light created a snowstorm of luminous floating specks that filled the entire sky. The dazzling scene was as fantastical as a dream. However, this beautiful marvel concealed an extremely sorrowful desire to kill. During this dazzling scene, Liu Jing formed an incantation gesture, causing the luminous specks in the sky to undergo a strange transformation. Gradually shrinking and expanding, they finally assumed shape of small golden swords. Although the swords were only an inch long, each one possessed a threateningly cold and incomparably incisive air. Thousand Blades Technique, Liu Jing said softly, revealing the name of his metal attribute magic technique. Everyone who saw this scene, aside from the two who were focusing on activating their treasure talismans, was left stunned. Metal attribute magic techniques were the rarest among the 5 elements, most commonly taking the form of defensive auxiliary magic techniques such as the Golden Armor Technique or the Iron Skin Technique. Liu Jing's offensive metal attribute area magic technique exceeded expectations, leaving Han Li and the others dumbfounded. They all slowed their actions, wanting to witness the entirety of this marvelous spell. Thousands of shining, sharp golden swords were suspended above the cocoons of light, emitting a frightening pressure. Liu Jing then chanted the activation incantation, causing the small golden swords to hail down and stab into the spheres of blood-red light. Poo-poo. Everyone heard a series of muffled stabs as the golden lights entered the blood-red spheres. Brilliance scattered in every direction like a dense storm of fireworks. Under the others' attacks, the light cocoons had displayed no change. But under this fierce attack, the cocoons began to gradually swell as if knowing the fearsomeness of this attack, and responded by taking the initiative to reinforce the blood-red light as increasingly intense waves of light swords struck down. When Liu Jing saw this, he felt neither joy nor worry. Since his attacks pressured the light cocoons to change, they were shown to be effective. So long as he increased the power of his attacks, he would be able to break through the blood-red light. But at this moment, more than half of the small swords had already fallen, and the light cocoons still appeared as red as they were at the start, looking as if they had handled the attacks with ease. "Senior Marshal Brother Liu, allow me to lend a hand." Song Ming shouted loudly. The gray talisman in his hand transformed into a meter-long gray spear that emitted a strange gray chi. "Let's get rid of the blood servant on the left first. Do not scatter our attacks." Seeing that Song Ming had condensed the true form of his treasure talisman, Liu Jing said this with unsuppressed joy. Soon after, he pointed at the small swords that had yet to fall. Suddenly, the gold swords started falling in a dense barrage toward the cocoon of leftmost blood servant, the ice demon. Following the rumbling sounds of impact, the cocoon of blood-red light seemed to have shriveled significantly. Having seen this, the others joined in, using magic techniques and magic tools in a simultaneous attack. Song Meng followed with his gray spear, causing it to release a sharp chilling wail as it shot forth. As the Thousand Blades techniques, and the others, instantaneous attacks whittled away at the remaining thin layer of the previously invulnerable blood cocoon, the silhouette within could vaguely be seen. The gray spear was able to finally penetrate the cocoon, causing a furious, deafening roar to echo in everyone's ears. 2 sharp, white crystal claws suddenly emerged from the blood-red light, immediately tearing away at the remaining shreds of the blood cocoon with ferocity and revealing the true appearance of the silhouette within. It was a half-demon transformed white monster. At first glance, this person appeared to be an incomparably beautiful and refined youth. However, two small white horns protruded from the top of his head, and a foot-long pure white tail sprouted out from behind him, each covered with faintly sparkling white scales. In addition to his two extremely sharp claws, his entire body exhibited layers upon layers of demonic properties. Two bowl-sized bloody holes were present on his shoulders. The flesh around them continuously squirmed and contracted, causing onlookers to feel their blood run cold. But in the blink of an eye, the bloody holes completely healed. "You're all courting death," the half-transformed ice demon yelled fiercely. Clearly, he had retained enough of his mind to be able to speak. Although he didn't finish his demon transformation, he believed that with the demonic characteristics of his current body, he would be able to buy time for his companions to finish their transformations. The complexions of Liu Jing and the others, who had yet to see the demonic transformation, paled after seeing this frightening appearance. Although they had previously heard Han Li mention the strange appearance of the blood servant's demon form, they became extremely shocked and apprehensive upon seeing it with their own eyes. Suddenly, several beams of white light struck the ice demon's bare body and immediately sent it tumbling, causing it to appear quite battered. Unwilling to hear the enemy's rubbish, Han Li had immediately ordered his puppet beasts to attack. When the others saw this, they came to their senses and madly resumed their barrage of attacks. However, the ice demon that fell to the floor released a cold mist from its entire body. As the mist spread, he disappeared from his original location. This left the others shocked, hastily looking in every direction. According to their previous experiences, when such a scene occurred, the opponent had used an evasion technique and quickly escaped. However, such a technique wouldn't have allowed them to flee far. Not a single person could be seen near the three remaining light cocoons. The ordinary Black Fiend School sect disciples had long fled as they weren't foolish enough to remain. When Han Li saw this, his heart trembled as he suddenly thought of something. He hastily patted his storage pouch, taking out his white scale shield and tortoise shell magic tools. He hurriedly had them revolve around his body as he loudly yelled, "Everyone, be careful." He concealed himself. Just as Han Li said this, a woman's miserable shriek could be heard, causing everyone to hastily look in the direction of the scream in alarm. They saw that junior martial sister Chen's senior martial sister, who was originally sitting down activating the talisman treasure, was now lying on her back. A large hole had appeared on her chest as if someone had reached in and torn out her heart. As she laid in a pool of her own blood, her beautiful appearance became slightly twisted as her limbs continuously thrashed about. Her eyes were filled with an incredulous fear before turning into unreconciled denial as her life slipped away. Chapter 321, Unseen Battle. Zhu Heng, one of Chen Kaioqian's senior martial brothers, loudly grieved for her. It seemed they were pair cultivation partners. He waved his hands, immediately shooting a black light toward the woman's corpse that madly attacked its surroundings in an attempt to find the demon who killed her. It could be said that the death of this senior martial sister, Zhu Heng, was truly unjust. Were it not for her competitive spirit, she wouldn't have used her treasure talisman and might still be alive. Before she attempted to activate the talisman treasure, a light muslin defensive magic tool had been hovering at her side. But in order to hasten the activation of her treasure talisman and cut down magic power consumption, she had retrieved her magic tool, consequently, leaving herself defenseless and her life forfeit. It is truly unfortunate that this woman was inexperienced and made such an extremely careless mistake. Her enemies had turned into light cocoons in front of her, and her fellow sect members surrounded her. As a result, she dared to activate this talisman treasure with an easy heart. Who could have predicted that the ice demon would emerge from the cocoon, half transformed, and immediately turn invisible before targeting her? At that moment, the woman had been in the final moments of activating the treasure talisman and was incapable of immediately stopping. Thus, she had fallen prey to the ice demon's malicious scheme. When Song Meng had activated his spear treasure talisman, he hadn't employed any defenses either. However, the might of his talisman treasure was comparatively smaller, enabling him to activate it sooner. Otherwise, he might have been targeted by the concealed ice demon instead. Furthermore, it wasn't just those two that hadn't set up any defenses. Neither had Han Li nor any of the others bothered to. They naturally wouldn't waste any magic power to deploy unnecessary defensive magic tools. After all, the light cocoons were targets incapable of striking back. They immediately set up defensive barriers with their magic tools after Han Li's reminder, preventing any further sneak attacks. Cold sweat ran down their backs from seeing Zhu Hong's tragic death. Her heart was torn from her chest, leaving her to die in a pool of her own blood. But what was most distressing was that, regardless of what methods they used, none of them were able to track down this demon. They occasionally spotted traces of him, but that demon would again disappear before they could react, as if he were constantly changing his location at great speed. The ice demon was half-transparent and would occasionally flicker in and out of their vision in every direction. Even with specialized autonomous magic tools, they were still unable to find a trace of him, as if he had completely disappeared. Suddenly becoming fearful for their safety, they began looking in every direction. They had actually been completely suppressed without addition action from the ice demon. Only Han Li looked at the present scene with a trace of bewilderment. Senior Marshal Brother Wang, who fought alongside Han Li, had never seen such a bloody scene before. His currently wore a fearful expression with pale complexion. Her death appeared to be a nightmare. He had originally imagined that this would be the time for him to show off his divine strength and easily wipe out the enemy, but things had turned out entirely different from how he imagined. Not long before, he had even joked about in which manner they could have possibly met their end. With that thought, he looked at the senior martial brother that was Zhu Hong's pair cultivation partner, causing his face to appear even more unsightly. Could it be that the more one feared something would happen, the more likely it was to occur? It was unknown whether he was feeling guilty about the appearance of the ice demon or felt a desire to act from his helplessness. But as he despondently paced back and forth, a transparent ice-gold claw appeared from behind him from thin air, fiercely stabbing toward his heart. The small bronze shield that was protecting Senior Marshal Brother Wang's body was completely autonomous. Without waiting for a command, it flashed toward the strike and blocked it. Dang! Although the sharp, ice-like claws were blocked by the small bronze shield, it was instantly frozen in a layer of thick frost and bluntly fell to the ground, temporarily becoming useless. At this moment, Senior Marshal Brother Wang discovered the astonishing event occurring behind him and felt blood drain from his face. He unconsciously turned around, incessantly looking in every direction, losing his mind to panic. After seeing there was nothing behind him, he hesitated for a moment before crouching to pick up the small bronze shield. He wanted to thaw it so that he would be able to use it once more. Quick dodge! The nearby Liu Jing loudly yelled in alarm after seeing his actions. But by the time he realized what was going on, the crisp sound of his protective water attribute barrier shattering caused him to feel a heart-chilling wind down his back. Damn it! At almost the same time Senior Marshal Brother Wang realized what was going to happen, the ice demon had already left concealment to make a fatal strike. In this instant, Senior Marshal Brother Wang's mind grew blank, filled with only the scene of Senior Marshal Sister Zhu Hong's tragic death. I truly didn't think that it would be my turn so quickly. This was the only thought that occupied his mind. But suddenly, his vision became hazy, and he felt his body become light. His entire body flew as if he were a cloud being carried by the wind, hearing sounds of wind and thunder underneath him, along with a loud, furious yell of surprise. Soon after, his two legs met the hard ground, and someone was standing before him with absolute calm. Senior Marshal Brother Wang, are you all right? While not knowing whether he was alive or dead, he heard a familiar voice full of deep concern. Upon hearing the familiar voice, he blankly turned his head and saw Liu Jing looking at him with worry. Seeing his face, Senior Marshal Brother Wang realized that he was alive and unharmed. With unconcealed happiness, he gratefully said, "Senior Marshal Brother Liu, were you the one who saved me?" Senior Marshal Brother was frightened from his own voice. From his coarse voice, it could clearly be seen that he had been truly shaken from the moment before. When Liu Jing heard this, he revealed an awkward, embarrassed appearance and said, "I'm quite ashamed to say Junior Marshal Brother's survival wasn't my doing. Junior Marshal Brother Han had acted a moment ago to save you, and is currently fighting that demon. Sai, I actually wasn't completely convinced by your earlier words earlier that Junior Marshal Brother Han had killed over 10 Foundation establishment cultivators due to his young age. But now my perspective has been broadened. Junior Marshal Brother Han's strength is truly unfathomable." Junior Marshal Brother Han. When Senior Marshal Brother Wang heard this, he was shocked. He clearly remembered that Han Li had been over 15 meters away from him. How was he able to make it in time? With that thought, Senior Marshal Brother Wang hastily turned his head toward the sounds of battle. What he saw left him dumbstruck. The location where he was attacked was now completely empty. However, he could hear the clangs of a fierce battle along with snarls and cries of injury. Furthermore, he could see sword chi and sharp streaks of light flying out of nowhere and strike the nearby terrain, leaving countless deep and shallow grooves. After a long moment, Senior Marshal Brother Wang finally came to his senses. As he thought to ask something about that astonishing scene, a violent wind suddenly blew at that location. A shining, translucent white silhouette appeared, followed by a strange figure that shot forth to attack it, leaving Senior Marshal Brother Wang breathless. The silhouette attacking the half-transformed blood servant appeared even more demonic than his target. His entire body was as transparent as clear crystal. Impossible, how are you able to see through my invisibility? How are you able to match my speed? The demon's sparkling face was full of furious surprise, and even held a trace of fear. However, after those words left his mouth, he let out a bestial snarl and fiercely pounced forward, his body disappearing from sight once more. The sound of battle stopped for a moment and Han Li's cold snort could be heard amongst the silence. The sounds then resumed, becoming even fiercer and were no longer confined to their original location. The sounds began to appear from every direction, causing the others, who could only hear the battle, to retreat with blanched faces. The pair cultivation partner of the dead female cultivator was the same, and could only helplessly fall back. He feared he would unknowingly become tangled in Han Li's fight with the demon and die without knowing how. They all knew in their hearts that they were unable to intervene in this unseen battle. "Quickly look at the ground," Song Ming shouted out in alarm. When the others heard this, they couldn't help but lower their heads and look. What they saw overwhelmed them with shock. At some unknown time, a layer of thick clear ice had condensed onto the ground. Underneath the moonlight, it appeared flawlessly smooth. This demon is quite crafty. He actually transformed the ground and put Junior Marshal Brother Han in a disadvantage, Song Ming anxiously said with worry. That doesn't seem to be the case. Although I don't know what movement technique Han Li is using, we were all unable to discover any trace of him, and from what we've heard, it doesn't seem that Han Li is at a disadvantage. It is clear that the icy ground doesn't have much of an effect on him. However, the transformed demon's craftiness truly caught us by surprise, unexpectedly causing one of our sect members to lose her life. I am truly to blame for this. Liu Jing unhurriedly said this after a moment of silence. After hearing this and seeing Liu Jing's solemn expression, the others didn't know how to console him. However, these people didn't know that the Junior Marshal Brother Han they spoke of was loudly scolding them in his heart as he fought with the ice demon. TL, Treasure Talisman Artifact Seal. Chapter 322, Liu Jing's True Seal. Han Li felt furious. His anger wasn't due to the fact that he had saved Senior Marshal Brother Wang in a moment of benevolence, or even because he had to fully utilize his shifting smoke steps. Han Li's anger was due to the fact that Liu Jing and the others were squandering this opportunity to eliminate the 3 transforming blood servants. Once the 3 blood servants finished transforming, a huge dilemma would await them. Han Li was reminded of Senior Marshal Brother Wang's kind assistance during his fight with Qing Wen, and thus, when Han Li noticed that Senior Marshal Brother Wang was on the verge of falling in the ice demon's scheme, he instantly flashed forward into order to save him. Enraged from Han Li's intervention, the ice demon immediately pursued him, forcing Han Li to deal with him. But soon after, Han Li felt that this ice demon would prove extremely troublesome for his fellow sect members and decided it would be better for him to take care of it alone. After all, if even more of his fellow sect members died, they would be lacking in numbers for the upcoming battle. However, during his fight with the ice demon, he didn't expect that the others would just stare blankly. They were actually squandering this great opportunity to attack the 3 remaining light cocoons. Even so, Han Li had a faint feeling that the others didn't even know this opportunity existed due to their fear of the ice demon's ambush. Although they realized that having to deal with the fully transformed blood servants would be even more troublesome, they were still hesitant and slightly desired to retreat. In reality, Han Li didn't come here in order to eradicate the Black Fiend School, but rather for another predetermined objective. As such, he was unable to run away in a rash manner. Ever since the half-transformed ice demon left his cocoon, he had been trying to kill Han Li. But Han Li found that so long as he was a bit careful, the demon did not pose much of a threat to him. In fact, he felt that the large, bald man was significantly harder to handle in comparison to the demon. Following the transformation, the ice demon acquired a transparent body, exceptional speed, and some control over cold chi. Thus, he was now able to utilize his speed to create an illusion of invisibility similar to that of the shifting smoke steps. But due to the ice demon's transparent body, he became even harder to detect. Since this strange movement technique could only be displayed on land, as long as they were above ground, they could force the ice demon to reveal itself by using large-scale magic techniques. After all, his high-speed movements were only deadly within a short distance. It was unable to keep up with a cultivator's flying magic tool. Because Liu Jing and company had never experienced this kind of close combat, they felt that their opponent was extremely monstrous and difficult to engage. Fortunately, Han Li had often fought in this manner, and naturally held greater experience in fighting such battles. With that in mind, Han Li suddenly repelled the demon's sharp claws with a wave of his silver sword, buying himself a short moment. He then stood still to become visible, and he loudly yelled, "Everyone, fly to the skies and continue to attack the other 3 blood servants. I will prevent this demon from attacking you." Following these instructions, Han Li's figure suddenly flickered, disappearing from sight once more. It was not surprising for Han Li that the silver sword, which had been looted during the trial by blood and fire, was able to withstand the demon's sharp claws. The fact that caused Han Li to become astonished was that the claws were also undamaged. When Liu Jing heard Han Li's instructions, he immediately understood what Han Li intended. Even so, he remained hesitant and felt extremely conflicted. Although Liu Jing originated from a large cultivation clan, he had been captured by evil cultivators during his childhood. During that time, he suffered from extreme, agonizing torment to the extent where he had almost lost his life. It was only afterwards that he was rescued by his clan and was apprenticed to Li Hueyuan. Due to the trauma he had experienced in his childhood, Liu Jing held deep hatred toward evil cultivators. As a result, he followed an iron-blooded policy to kill all evil cultivators on sight, refusing to allow any evil cultivator from escaping his grasp, regardless of what freakish techniques they practiced. Much to his delight, these actions rewarded him with great popularity among other cultivators, even causing a few Seven Sect cultivators with higher cultivation than him to look at him with a trace of admiration. Although Liu Jing continued to appear unfazed on the outside, his heart gradually began to indulge in these feelings of admiration. In fact, he later took the initiative to root out evil cultivators from every direction, mostly for the sake of seeing others gaze upon him with admiration. Naturally, Liu Jing hid this fact in the depths of his heart with extreme care and conducted himself as though he were a moral paragon. Thus, Liu Jing became known as an enemy of evil, the iron-blooded senior martial brother Liu. Now that another evil known as the Black Fiend School had appeared, he was compelled to eliminate it. However, they were the strongest evil cultivators he had ever encountered. He wasn't completely confident that he would be able to rely on his normal magic tools to eliminate the 3 remaining blood servants. His attack power was lacking and would only serve to end their transformations earlier, resulting in 3 more half-demons to fight. One half-transformed demon was already very difficult to handle. They did not know if they could handle additional half-demons, or if they would just be throwing their lives away. But if they were to retreat now, they would have just scared the Black Fiend School away, resulting in the complete failure of their mission. If they allowed the Black Fiend School to disappear without a trace and conceal themselves once more, Liu Jing's painfully nurtured reputation would be thoroughly and irrevocably destroyed. The thought of others looking upon him with contempt caused Liu Jing to feel winded and extremely depressed. Han Li's exhortation had forced him to make a choice. "Senior Martial Brother Liu, should we retreat? The Black Fiend School is far stronger than we've imagined. If we're going to retreat, we must do it now or else it will be too late," Senior Martial Brother Wang softly said after approaching hesitantly. Liu Jing could clearly see cowardice from Martial Brother Wang's shifting gaze. "Retreat? If I retreat now, then I'll appear just as cowardly," Liu Jing thought with a bitter smile. "Everyone fly to the skies and protect me as I cast my magic. Let me deal with the 3 blood servants," Liu Jing instructed. At the same time, he thought, it seems I'll have to use my life-saving measure in this fight. Otherwise, I won't be able to win and preserve my reputation. "Senior Martial Brother Liu, you want to deal with the blood servants by yourself." However, when the others heard Liu Jing's words, they all looked at him in disbelief, causing Liu Jing to feel a bottomless ache in his heart. But still, his appearance remained calm. Without speaking, he flew directly to the sky on a magic tool as he solemnly retrieved a fire-red jade box from his storage pouch. At this moment, Liu Jing had completely recovered his calmness as if he were in complete control. When the surrounding disciples saw this, they glanced at each other and felt slightly more confident as they followed after him. A reluctant look covered Liu Jing's face as he stared at the jade box in his hand, but soon after, his expression became resolved and he placed his hands on the box. In an instant, the jade box shattered apart into minuscule pieces, revealing a peculiar talisman covered in red light. A fire-red flame bird was inscribed on the talisman. It incessantly flapped its wings as though it was flying freely like a real bird. The bird's glowing blue eyes even occasionally shifted. The most astonishing fact was the scorching chi the talisman emitted. It caused the temperature within 30 meters to abruptly rise, leaving his allies parched from the scorching heat. Song Meng and the others approached and saw the astonishing scene of the talisman unfold. Artifact seal, Song Meng exclaimed upon seeing the talisman. No, this isn't a common artifact seal. This is a true seal. After seeing the talisman's strange appearance, Senior Marshal Brother Wang cried out as if he had just seen a ghost. Those who knew of this true seal were dumbstruck. While this so-called true seal was considered an artifact seal, it was completely different from a common artifact seal. First of all, common artifact seals only contained a tenth of the original magic treasures might at most. However, a true seal defied this convention, allowing it to contain a third of a magic treasure's might. Secondly, true seals could only be refined with the bloodline of the magic treasure's master. As a result, only descendants of this specific bloodline would be able to activate and make use of this true seal. If someone else were to attempt to use it, the true seal would destroy itself. With such great benefits, there naturally had to be some significant disadvantages. Otherwise, all the elders would leave their later generations with only true seals. While true seals contained several times more power than an ordinary talisman treasure, its greatest flaw was that it could only be used once. This single use would display the entirety of its might without restraint and leave no second use. As a result, it was far less practical than common artifact seals. Additionally, there was another reason as to why so few true seals were passed down. After a magic treasure went through the process of bloodline refinement in order to produce a true seal, the magic treasure would suffer permanent and irrecoverable loss in strength. After knowing these restrictions, elder cultivators felt it would be far better to leave behind several ordinary artifact seals for their descendants, rather than ruining their own magic treasures which were as precious to them as their own lives. Thus, many cultivators joked that there were several times more magic treasures in the cultivation world than true seals. Although these words were slightly exaggerated, they weren't far from the truth. Chapter 323, Demon Execution. True seals were several times more difficult to activate compared to common seals. As a result of this, Liu Jing asked his fellow sect members to protect him, as he did not wish to meet the same tragic end as his junior martial sister. Finishing his instructions, Liu Jing protected himself using his yellow ring magic tool before he sat down cross-legged on his flying magic tool. With a calm heart, Liu Jing began to pour magic power into the Firebird True Seal. As the fire-red talisman's glow gradually intensified in Liu Jing's hand, the inscribed Firebird's wings became increasingly nimble and lively. It seemed as though the Firebird would suddenly materialize and fly out from the talisman at any moment. Although Han Li was engaged in battle with the ice demon on land, he felt at ease knowing that his fellow sect disciples were taking action. He had feared that his fellow sect disciples would cower and run away in defeat. If he were left alone, Han Li would be unable to obtain the item he desired from the Black Fiend schoolmaster. No longer worried about being deserted, Han Li wholeheartedly focused on the enemy before him. Even as a mid-foundation establishment cultivator, the shifting smoke steps still placed a significant burden on his body. Thus, he couldn't let this battle of extreme speed drag on. He had to risk an all-out assault. With that in mind, Han Li incessantly flickered about while brandishing a silver sword in one hand, suppressing the ice demon and leaving him winded. With Han Li's other hand, he silently summoned an item from his storage pouch and wounded around his ring finger. Killing intent flashed through his eyes. Han Li charged forward at a fearsome speed, sword grasped in both hands. He suddenly made a vicious attack, inspiring fear in the ice demon. The ice demon hastily fell back and raised his sharp crystal claws in defense. Dang, the ice demon coldly laughed, Taking advantage of the strike's momentum, the ice demon flew backwards and increased the distance between him and Han Li. At that moment, a slight sneer appeared on Han Li's face. When the ice demon saw this, he felt extremely uneasy. Han Li let go of his sword with one hand and pulled. In turn, the ice demon felt an indescribable force halt his retreat and could no longer avoid Han Li's fierce strike. At that moment, Han Li grasped the sword in both hands once more and expressionlessly moved to strike. When the ice demon saw this, he turned pale and hastily started struggling with all his might. Unfortunately, it was already too late. In the blink of an eye, Han Li had already appeared before him. Han Li's sword blurred momentarily, and countless silver streaks assaulted the ice demon as they flashed past each other. At the following instant, two figures appeared beneath the moonlight, Han Li standing with a sword in his grasp and the ice demon falling to the ground. Having clearly seen this, Song Meng and the others couldn't help but feel extremely nervous. The ice demon staggered to his feet and looked at Han Li's back with an evil grin. As he thought to say something, his expression suddenly froze. The sound of a series of sharp ruptures could be heard, revealing countless fine cracks on the ice demon's transparent body. As the sounds continued, the cracks grew larger, eventually turning the ice demon's body into a pile of broken, translucent ice. As the translucent crystals broke down, a complete undamaged claw weakly reached out with its sharp tips still emitting dense cold chi. This was the only thing to survive Han Li's rapid cuts. It was also left completely unharmed. Han Li dispassionately looked at the ice demon's remains. Then he turned his gaze toward the dazzling three light cocoons, wrinkling his brow. He silently pulled his hand, causing the ice claw to fly toward him. From the reflection of the moonlight, a thin transparent thread could be faintly seen between the sharp claw and Han Li. This was precisely the ice demon's cause of death. Taking advantage of their close distance during the previous strike, Han Li had controlled the transparent thread on his ring finger to stealthily wind around his claw. Unfortunately, while the demon transformation left the ice demon's body transparent and strong, it had also dulled his senses, allowing Han Li to succeed in taking his life. Han Li lowered his head to look at the ice claw, and after a moment of hesitation, he threw it away. Since the ice claw was able to withstand his silver sword without harm, he understood it was certain to be exceptionally good material for refining magic tools. But with the knowledge that it was originally a person's hand, his heart shivered and he was unable to overcome his disgust. He walked to the side of the ice demon's remains and casually slashed at the ice pile a few times with a silver sword, fishing out a storage pouch from within. After taking a quick look at it, he carefully put it away. He then silently flew to the sky, wanting to see how his fellow sect members would deal with the three transformed blood servants. Han Li didn't know that during the moment that the ice demon had lost his life, a middle-aged man in meditation suddenly opened his blood-red eyes and muttered to himself, "Ice demon has already died. That's fine. It'll save me the effort of dealing with him in the future." With that said, he calmly closed his eyes as if nothing had happened. A shriveled corpse lay before him. From the clear outlines of the bone, it appeared that there was no flesh underneath the skin. The corpse was wearing the clothes of a yellow Maple Valley cultivator. Han Li flew to the sky, and before he opened his mouth, Song Meng and the others had surrounded him. With expressions of admiration and shock, they all showered him with praise. Their words even held a trace of reverence. Senior Martial Sister Zhu Hong's pair cultivation partner was flushed with thankfulness toward Han Li. Han Li said a few humbling words. He then noticed the blinding red talisman in Liu Jing's hand and curiously asked about it. Someone immediately gave Han Li an explanation about true seals, causing Han Li to feel overjoyed and relieved. Naturally, Han Li had heard of true seals before. However, he hadn't expected that senior martial brother Liu would have such a treasure and would be willing to use such a critical life-saving measure. Han Li hadn't known Liu Jing for long, and had no way of knowing about Liu Jing's complicated dilemma, overpaying such a heavy cost to preserve his reputation. In Han Li's case, he basically didn't care how others looked at him. So long as his own reputation didn't get in his way of his rewards, he didn't care. Naturally, if Han Li had the opportunity to leave a good impression without expending much effort, he would be quite willing to do it. But to use something as precious as a true seal in order to maintain his reputation, Han Li wouldn't be willing to do such a foolish thing even if he would be killed. Even so, Liu Jing's action had truly left an impression on Han Li. He even doubted the validity of his long-held belief. If there were those in this world that truly acted to exterminate evil, then what would that make him? Could he be considered a good person? Just as Han Li was feeling slightly ashamed, he suddenly heard a ferocious roar filled with the desire of blood and massacre from below. Han Li and company hastily looked down in alarm. One of the three light cocoons had undergone a huge change, appearing as if the blood servant within was about to emerge. Han Li's heart trembled. It seemed he would have to fight another blood servant in order to buy time for senior martial brother Liu to finish. With that in mind, Han Li started to take action, but was interrupted by a tranquil voice from behind him. "Everyone step aside. Allow me to eliminate those three demons." Upon hearing this, everyone revealed joy. Han Li hastily turned around and saw Liu Jing looking at them with a smile. He had a small, exquisite red bird in his hand. It fluttered about and appeared extremely adorable. Additionally, the scorching chi in the vicinity had disappeared without a trace at an unknown time. "That is the appearance of the true seal." Han Li looked at the small red bird with astonishment. "Thank you very much for protecting me, everyone." Liu Jing flew to the front of the group in a relaxed manner. Under the gaze of the others' amazement, he acted without the slightest hesitation and lightly blew at the small bird in his hand. With a clear chirp, the small firebird quickly flew forward from Liu Jing's hand. At that moment, a light cocoon beneath them had finished its transformation. Pache, a demon wrapped in azure light, emerged from its cocoon. Its shape was quite similar to the half-transformed ice demon, however, its appearance was a deep azure. From the demon's appearance, one could clearly tell that it was Taoist priest Qing Wen. But at this moment, he appeared completely crazed, as if he didn't possess the ability to think. He let out two mad roars and raised his head to look at the small, fluttering firebird. His body immediately grew still, and the insanity displayed on his face was restrained, revealing an expression of great fear. He then lost himself to panic and looked around him. He suddenly flew to the skies covered in azure light. It seemed he wished to escape. But at that moment, a fierce explosion erupted from the small red bird, changing it into a large blazing bird about 3 meters wide. It spread its wings and traveled over 30 meters in an instant, appearing before the demon-transformed Qing Wen. With its sharp red beak, it lightly pecked at him. Chapter 324, The Black Fiend Schoolmaster. The blazing firebird flew over 20 meters into the air and pecked at Qing Wen with its huge beak, turning him into a huge, plummeting fireball. When he landed on the ground, he only managed to wretchedly scream twice before turning into a pile of ash without the slightest resistance. As Han Li watched on in complete astonishment, the huge firebird sharply cried out. Turning its head toward the two remaining light cocoons, it fiercely charged toward them. As a result, a huge pillar of fire erupted into the sky from the location of the cocoons. The two nearly transformed blood servants were instantly engulfed in an ocean of fire. The light cocoons were only able to bitterly resist the raging flames for a short moment before completely disappearing. The defenseless blood servants then silently swayed for several steps before completely turning to ash. The blazing flame appeared extraordinary. Its unexpected ferociousness greatly shocked Han Li, leaving him with another memory of a core formation cultivator's magic treasures mine. Apart from Han Li, his fellow cultivators all had expressions of pleasant surprise. "That true seal is incredibly powerful. We were able to eradicate this evil school, all because of Liu Jing." The others excitedly spoke to each other in great excitement. From their point of view, with the blood servants eliminated, all they had left to deal with was the Black Fiend Schoolmaster. As a group of many Foundation establishment cultivators, there was no reason to believe that they wouldn't be able to deal with a lone evil schoolmaster. As Liu Jing saw the firebird's raging flames gradually disappear, he greatly lamented, but after hearing the others' praises, his spirits were raised. "We've wasted quite a bit of time. Let's enter and exterminate the Black Fiend Schoolmaster." Liu Jing waved his arm with a mighty, heroic air. The others nodded in agreement and followed after him. Han Li faintly smiled, but as he was about to follow after them, he spotted senior martial brother Wang blankly staring in some direction with a strange expression. This somewhat surprised Han Li, and he couldn't help but follow Wang's gaze. Aside from the white ash of the transformed blood servants and the pitifully arranged remains of Zhu Hong, what else could he be looking at? "Senior martial brother Wang, did you discover something?" Han Li couldn't help but doubtfully ask. No, I didn't discover anything. Junior martial brother Han, you are being overly suspicious." When senior martial brother Wang heard Han Li's question, he immediately shifted his gaze before answering. When Han Li saw this, how couldn't he tell that something was strange? This person had certainly discovered something important but didn't want to tell the others. Why else would he act like this? Han Li became somewhat depressed, but with a slight smile he said, "Since it is nothing, let's quickly descend. Everyone wishes to go in." Pointing in the direction of the cold palace, Han Li wordlessly descended, leaving Senior Marshal Brother Wang to be the last one remaining in the sky. Uncertainty and doubt fluctuating on his face, he eventually stomped his foot and helplessly followed after them. As Han Li landed on the ground, he heard a lovely voice from the sky. "Senior Marshal Brother Liu, Junior Marshal Brother Han, wait for us." After a moment of surprise, Han Li slowly turned his head toward the sky. When the others heard this, they stopped and looked in the direction of the voice with happy expressions. Underneath the soft moonlight, Zhang Wenying and Chen Kai-okian were slowly descending from the sky with an extremely pale middle-aged man in tow, suspended by his collar on the flying magic tool. The middle-aged man wore golden clothes and had a deathly pale complexion. When he saw Han Li and the others, he appeared to become even more panicked. When Liu Jing saw them, he welcomed them with a slight smile. "It seems that you two were able to smoothly succeed. So this is the Emperor of Yue." After the two female cultivators landed, Liu Jing turned his gaze to the middle-aged man and asked without paying much mind. "That's right, this guy was in meeting with a few officials in some hall. After Senior Marshal's sister and I knocked out the officials and grabbed the Emperor, two Qi condensation disciples rushed out in an attempt to stop us, but we were able to easily dispatch them. Senior Marshal Brother Liu, it seems you haven't encountered any problems either. That's great." When Zhang Wenyang saw Liu Jing was completely unharmed, she incessantly chattered, expressing unmistakable concern for him. This caused Liu Jing to appear embarrassed, much to the entertainment of Han Li. "Junior Marshal Sister Chen, are you also all right?" Two of Chen Kai-okian's senior marshal brothers asked cordially. With an indifferent expression, Chen Kai-okian confirmed this and swept her gaze past the group. When she saw Han Li, she stared at him for a moment before turning away with a complicated expression. "Where is Senior Marshal Sister Zhu Hong?" Chen Kai-okian wrinkled her delicate brow and asked with a feeling of foreboding. When those words were asked, everyone's faces sank, revealing a heavy expression. "We lost Zhu Hong in the battle." With great difficulty, Senior Marshal Sister Zhu Hong's Dao companion said this with a voice full of sorrow. As soon as they heard this, Chen Kai-okian and Zhang Wenyang's expressions instantly became unsightly. Zhang Wenyang immediately became furious, saying, "How could you?" However, she was only able to say half of that sentence before she was interrupted by a miserable cry. Han Li and the others were frightened and immediately looked in the direction of the scream with great vigilance. A blue-robed man had appeared near them at an unknown time. They saw his hand flicker with red light as he withdrew it from Senior Marshal Brother Wang's chest. In the following moment, Marshal Brother Wang's lifeless corpse then fell to the ground. "I originally hadn't thought to kill you. However, children really shouldn't take what isn't theirs," the blue-robed man said with a beaming smile. He appeared about 40 years old and had a very fair complexion. With his slight wrinkles at the corner of his eye, he had a rather benevolent appearance. With that said, he bent over and picked up a thumb-sized azure bead from the corpse, causing his smile to grow even larger. After they saw this person, Liu Jing and Han Li's faces sunk at the same time, revealing expressions of extreme caution. "Your esteemed self must be the Black Fiend School Master," Liu Jing probingly asked with a thoughtful expression. "Hee, how smart. I truly am the founder of the Black Fiend School, so you must be the leader," the old man chuckled. When they all heard that this person was supposed to be the Black Fiend School Master, even Han Li couldn't help but appear shocked. Each of the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators then took out their magic tools as they faced this great enemy. After Liu Jing's expression sunk, he deeply exhaled and suppressed the panic in his heart. Soon after, he stealthily made a careful gesture to the others and coldly asked, "Correct. I am Liu Jing, the leader of this mission. I've come to exterminate your evil Black Fiend School. Even now that you are alone, you still dare to violently kill. You are truly courageous." Liu Jing said this awe-inspiring, righteous speech in a fearless display. Although he was very satisfied with his own performance, he became even more imposing as he continued. So long as he eliminated this evil school's master, his name would reach even greater heights among the 7 sects. In turn, others would look upon him with even greater reverence and admiration. With that thought, Liu Jing's mind gradually became drunk with fervor, and he took out 2 silver hooks along with a ring. Without waiting for the opposition to act, the Black Fiend schoolmaster suddenly flashed a strange smile to him and softly whispered to Liu Jing in a voice only he could hear, "Then you can die." At that moment, Liu Jing felt a pain from the center of his chest. Without knowing what had happened, a blood-drenched arm had already pierced through his chest, revealing a round, squirming object in its hand. "What is this?" Liu Jing couldn't help but think this in amazement. Perhaps he truly understood what happened, but he was unwilling to believe it. Soon after, he felt the world spin around him, and his vision turned black. He could still hear several shrieks and the mourning cries from his unrequited admirer, Zhang Wenyang. However, those sounds became increasingly unfamiliar and distant as time passed. "Sigh, this young girl really loves to cry." Liu Jing had one last, anguished thought before sinking into eternal darkness. Han Li's expression became very unsightly. Before the battle even started, the enemy had already killed 2 mid-foundation establishment cultivators. Even Liu Jing, the leader of the group, had actually died so easily. With hands stabbed through the corpses of Liu Jing and Senior Marshal Brother Wang, Liu Jing's attacker flashed toward the Black Fiend School Master's side and flashed an evil grin toward them. This had happened so fast that Han Li had been unable to react. After Liu Jing died, Zhang Wenyang was thoroughly stunned and was only able to release heart-wrenching screams. When Chen Kaioqian saw this, she hastily pulled Zhang Wenyang behind her in an attempt to protect her. She then looked at the attacker with a face filled with fury and remorse. Chapter 325, Peculiarity. Thud, thud. Liu Jing's and Senior Marshal Brother Wang's corpses were casually tossed to the ground by the ambusher. The corner of Han Li's eye twitched when he saw this. "Since you've come, don't think about leaving. I'm still lacking foundation establishment blood sacrifices." The ambusher smiled sinisterly, causing his white teeth to twinkle underneath the moonlight. The ambusher was none other than the Emperor of Yue, who had appeared to be scared stiff just a moment ago. But now, he was no longer that sorry figure that lost himself to fear, but a late foundation establishment cultivator with magic power fluctuations no weaker than those of the blue-robed man, the Black Fiend schoolmaster. Han Li's expression grew ice cold, in response to the sudden appearance of an opponent with such deep cultivation. Han Li didn't know what technique the Emperor had used a moment ago, but he was able to completely conceal his cultivation from all of the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators. This reminded Han Li of his prior inability to detect magic power from the young prince and steward Wang. Unlike the previous occasion, Han Li didn't perceive a queer premonition of danger, instilling him with even greater fear and caution. Han Li flicked his finger, causing the white scale shield and the tortoise-shell magic tool to unhurriedly revolve around him. As the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators nervously glanced at the Emperor of Yue and the blue-robed man, they took out their magic tools and closely wound them around their bodies, protecting themselves. Seeing the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators act as if they were facing a great enemy, the Emperor of Yue and the Black Fiend schoolmaster looked at each other and coldly laughed. The Black Fiend schoolmaster suddenly flashed, appearing over 30 meters away next to the sparkling ice pile, which were the fragmented remains of the ice demon. The Black Fiend schoolmaster glanced at the ice pile and casually held out his hand towards it, which caused a blue bead to fly from the ice demon's remains into his hand. At that same moment, the treacherous Emperor of Yue flashed toward the 2 blood servants that were turned into ash by the Firebird True Seal. He fiercely slapped the ground, causing a golden and a yellow bead to fly from the ground and toward his hand. "Those are..." When Han Li saw those beads, he drew a connection to the azure bead that was taken from Marshal Brother Wang's corpse. He immediately came to a faint realization on what they were and felt his heart tighten. He truly didn't expect that his objective for coming here would suddenly appear before his eyes. These were certain to be related to the 5 elements blood cores concerning core formation that the young prince had mentioned. However, there were only 4 such beads here. Where could the final one be? At the same time Han Li came to this conclusion, the Emperor of Yue and the Black Fiend schoolmaster beamed with joy, having gathered the beads. Facing towards the sky, the group suddenly broke into laughter. As they continued laughing, they turned their cold gazes toward Han Li and company, revealing an unconcealed desire for murder. Han Li and company couldn't help but slightly pale in response. "Everyone take to the skies." Thoughts suddenly surged through Han Li's mind before he finally shouted this and summoned his divine wind boat, flying first to the sky. The others were startled at Han Li's shout, But Song Meng and Zhu Hong's Dao companion, who held great confidence in him, unconsciously flew to the sky as instructed. However, when Chen Kai-okian heard Han Li, she hesitated for a moment before dragging Zhang Wenyang along with her to the sky. When the Emperor of Yue and the Black Fiend School Master saw this, their faces flashed with astonishment before sneering in unison. While it was clear they were two completely different people, the smiles they gave Han Li left him with the strange impression that they were one, causing Han Li's heart to tremble. That boy is quite quick-witted. It seems you'll have to sacrifice your body earlier than expected. Me, why not you? Once you take it, it will be irrecoverable. The Emperor of Yue and the blue-clothed man faintly spoke beneath them. Hearing their strange comments, Han Li and company felt a cold chill down their backs. Junior Marshal Brother Han, what are they talking about? Song Ming gulped and moved closer to Han Li. Having seen so many fellow sect members die before him, even the battle-obsessed Song Ming was unable to maintain his originally fearless drive. He asked Han Li in order to calm his heart. After all, Han Li gave him a feeling of mystery and slight reliability. When Han Li heard the question, he bitterly smiled in his heart. As he was thinking of what to say, something occurred below them. Han Li's expression vastly changed, and he immediately swallowed what he was about to say. Chen Kai-okian then cried out, drawing Song Meng's fearful gaze to the scene below. He saw the Emperor of Yue stick his hand into the Black Fiend School Master's chest. The Black Fiend School Master had held his arms wide and didn't struggle in the slightest. Instead, he wore a smile on his face. The Black Fiend School Master and the Emperor of Yue each emitted a dazzling bloody light. Through the Emperor of Yue's arm that pierced the Black Fiend School Master's chest, their bloody lights joined together, and the light from the Black Fiend School Master madly surged into the Emperor of Yue's body. It appeared that the Black Fiend School Master had taken the initiative to deliver himself to the Emperor of Yue, leaving Song Meng dumbstruck. The Black Fiend School Master's brilliance grew increasingly weaker, and his flesh grew increasingly shriveled. Conversely, the Emperor of Yue's light grew stronger by the moment and even appeared slightly younger. What evil technique is this? Song Meng cried out with shock. Han Li's expression grew incomparably dark, and he paid no mind to Senior Marshal Brother Song's outburst. Instead, he took a deep breath and suddenly flung his hands outward. No less than 200 fire attribute talismans raced from his hands toward the Emperor of Yue and the Black Fiend School Master. This talisman barrage, consisting of fire serpents, fireballs, and other such fire attribute techniques, was made up of all the fire attribute talismans that Han Li had on hand. Halfway through, these talismans turned into a heaven-shrouding display of fire attribute techniques, a huge and overbearing wave of fire. This grand display exerted an even greater pressure than that of Liu Jing's Firebird True Seal. Such a display of over 100 talismans being thrown out was extremely rare in the cultivation world. After all, someone would have to spend hundreds of spirit stones to acquire that many talismans. This mighty display left the group of Yellow Maple Valley cultivators in shock. Even the despondent Zhang Wenyang blankly stared at the scene in surprise. Initially, the Emperor of Yue was also greatly shocked at the scene. But after he saw they were merely low-grade magic techniques, he brushed it off with disdain beneath contempt. He understood that the bloody light protecting his body would leave him completely unscathed from those magic techniques, allowing him to pay attention to the important matter before him. So long as he finished this, killing the opposition would be as easy as throwing out trash. But for an instant, palpitating fear could be seen in the Emperor of Yue's eyes, as the flames that filled the sky surged down to submerge him and the Black Fiend School Master. But as he expected, regardless of how deafening the attack or how the flames soared, the bloody light surrounding their bodies kept them safe and sound. By then, over half of the Black Fiend School Master's light had flowed into the Emperor of Yue's body. The Emperor of Yue now appeared about 30 years old, much to his pleasure. When Chen Kai-okian and the others saw Han Li's attack, they each followed up by sending down their magic tools. After all, it appeared the enemy was using some sort of evil technique and couldn't retaliate. Chen Kai-okian and the others would naturally want to use this opportunity to beat down the enemy. Just as they launched their magic tools, a blinding white light ruptured from the Emperor of Yue and the blue-robed man, followed by a deafening explosion. The fluctuating, volatile white light had enveloped the two within it. The fearsome amount of spiritual power contained within the white light left the Emperor of Yue with an expression of fright. When Chen Kai-okian and the others saw this, they were pleasantly surprised and looked to Han Li. This scene must have been the work of their fellow sect member. However, Han Li didn't appear happy in the slightest and instead appeared solemn and cold. "You are all celebrating far too early. They still aren't dead," Han Li coldly said with an indifferent glance. His words startled the others, causing them to hastily turn their gaze. Underneath the concealment of the resulting smoke and dust, the Emperor of Yue's spiritual qi was still faintly discernible. Although it was still present, his magic power had been greatly decreased. The spirits of the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators shook from what they saw with their spiritual sense, and they commanded their magic tools to spiral around them. Once the Emperor of Yue was visible, they would make a joint attack and get revenge for the tragic deaths of their fellow sect members. "Qi, good, Qi. I truly made an error in judgment. Who would have thought that your esteemed self was the most troublesome among the group? You actually hid something among the talismans and managed to break through my protective bloodline." A burst of coughs came from the smoke, but as the Emperor of Yue gradually regained a steady voice, his tone became increasingly cold. When the others heard this, their expressions massively changed. Han Li was also overwhelmed with shock. "A heavenly lightning seed. I truly did not think that there were Foundation establishment cultivators capable of surviving a heavenly lightning seed," Han Li slowly said under his breath. He then waved his hands, and a burst of white light appeared in front of him. Each of the silhouettes gradually became clear as the light faded. The silhouettes were various puppet beasts and soldiers all aiming at the ground. After seeing the puppets appear, Song Meng and the others fiercely attacked the Emperor of Yue without hesitation. However, a burst of red light flashed and severed the magic tools' connections to their owners. Covered in blood and filth, the Emperor of Yue walked out of the smoke and rigidly stared at Han Li with bitter resentment. Chapter 326, Blood Spirit Drill. Han Li didn't look at the Emperor of Yue's resentful gaze. Instead, he looked at the darkened, bloody light that remained on his body. A golden ruler, a pair of jagged purple blades, and a blue longsword floated within the bloody light. They were the magic tools of Song Meng and company. At this moment, they were motionless within the bloody light. It seemed they had completely lost their spirit. Han Li's eyes flashed with thoughtfulness. It seemed the devilish light protecting the Emperor of Yue's body was capable of corrupting common magic tools. The only item Han Li currently had on hand that could resist this evil technique was the Black Dragon's grasps. Until now, the only person to appear from the cloud of debris was the Emperor of Yue. It appeared as though the blue-robed man, who had claimed to be the Black Fiend schoolmaster, had truly died from the heavenly lightning seed. With that thought, even though Han Li's heart relaxed, he had no intention of giving the enemy an opportunity to catch his breath. Han Li immediately issued a mental order to his puppets to start their attack, launching an unending barrage of light beams and arrows toward the enemy. Now fearful of losing even more of their magic tools, the group of Yellow Maple Valley cultivators chanted incantations and formed hand seals instead, continuously throwing down magic techniques and talismans alongside Han Li's attack. They all understood that the only way to free themselves from this nightmare would be to strike with all their might. Otherwise, even more of them would suffer tragic ends. When the Emperor of Yue saw this, he expressionlessly swept his arm in front of him. A huge shield of blood-red light appeared, easily blocking the oncoming attacks. However, the bloody light emitted from his body was becoming increasingly weaker and gave the impression that it might fail at any time. This caused Han Li and company to attack with even more fury. The Emperor of Yue coldly snorted as he wordlessly took out a small dark green bottle from his bosom. He nimbly tossed out a scarlet, longan-sized pill from the bottle that reeked of blood. It didn't appear to be any sort of good medicine, but he still threw it into his mouth without the slightest hesitation and threw the bottle away. It actually only held a single medicine pill. Once the scarlet pill reached the Emperor of Yue's stomach, Han Li witnessed a shocking scene. The Emperor of Yue's expression shook and his bloody light became brilliant once more. In addition, his wounds were healing at a speed visible to the eye. In that short moment, Han Li watched as the enemy recovered all of his magic power and healed all of the wounds he received from the heavenly lightning seed. Damn it, how could such a thing happen? When Song Meng saw this, he muttered in disbelief, forgetting to throw out his tens of already prepared ice spikes. Han Li also couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't know what pill the opponent took, but it had heaven-defying effects. He had read all sorts of ancient books, but none of them had mentioned something like this. He used a cultivation essence pill, a life-saving medicine pill that can only be refined after cultivating several particular devilish arts and by harming one's own cultivation. This pill can only be used by its creator as it is fatal for anyone else who takes it. A clear, cold voice came from Chen Kaioqian's side, leaving Han Li stunned. Even Chen Kaioqian turned around with a face full of surprise. Senior Martial Sister Zhang, you're all right. I'm fine. However, the demon that killed Senior Martial Brother Liu is before my eyes and I must kill him. Zhang Wenying had finally come to her senses. She smiled with great difficulty at Chen Kaioqian before saying this with a cold expression. We all wish to kill him, but the problem is that he wishes to do the same to us. Han Li indifferently replied without turning his head. Zhang Wenying turned and looked below in surprise. What she saw suddenly caused her expression to become unsightly. As they were talking, the Emperor of Yue, who was below them, withdrew his shield of light. The bloody light that surrounded his body surged and expanded until it was about 10 meters thick. The magic tools that were trapped within the bloody light had then started to gradually melt away. The radiance protecting his body was now several times larger, and his cultivation was far greater than it was previously. As such, the bloody light on his body was now able to easily resist the assault of magic techniques and puppet attacks. The Emperor of Yue raised his head to stare solely at Han Li with ice-cold eyes. He abruptly reached his hand out from behind him and grabbed at the air. A fire-red bead then suddenly flew out from somewhere and accurately dropped into his hand. Seeing this, Han Li's eyes flashed with surprise as he thought of the blue-robed man that had died from his heavenly lightning seed. It seems that this bead was from his remains, and now the 5 elements blood cores could be considered complete. So long as Han Li could kill this fiend, he would be able to acquire this treasure that would greatly benefit his core formation. Boy, do you have any more heavenly lightning seeds? If you have them, then I'll stand right here and receive them. I want to see whether your heavenly lightning seeds or my protective devilish art is greater. The Emperor of Yue carefully put the bead away and said this to Han Li in a cold voice. Once those words left his mouth, the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators were startled and couldn't help but look at Han Li. Han Li's expression didn't change, but he inwardly snorted. He calmly replied, "This one is also quite curious whether you are the Black Fiend School sect master, or if that other person was. Furthermore, it appears from the current circumstances that your esteemed self had previously absorbed over half of his cultivation before you were interrupted. I am quite puzzled as there are rarely such people willing to act as a sacrifice in this world." Han Li didn't answer his question, but asked the question in return. He returned derision with derision. When the Emperor of Yue heard this, he revealed a strange expression that resembled both regret and mockery. But soon after, for some unknown reason, his face appeared increasingly menacing as his eyebrows became downward slanted. Han Li's heart trembled, and he opened his mouth slightly, quietly sending the 4 remaining Yellow Maple Valley cultivators a sound transmission that left them shocked. Having finished that, Han Li then indifferently said, "Whether or not you believe my words is up to you." Han Li didn't use sound transmission for that last sentence, allowing the Emperor of Yue to clearly hear him. The Emperor's face grew cold, and he suddenly pointed a finger at Han Li, shooting a beam of red light as thick as a thumb toward him in an instant. Although the red beam of light was astonishingly quick, Han Li was still barely able to cause both his white scale shield and tortoise shell to superimpose in front of him. Soon after, a barrier of blue light covered his body. Han Li didn't dare to be careless against this unknown attack. Poo-poo. When Han Li heard this, he unconsciously leaned to his side before feeling heat in his right shoulder, followed by acute pain. After seeing a bleeding, finger-sized hole in his shoulder, Han Li's face became unsightly. He licked his dry lips and turned his gaze toward his 2 magic tools with disbelief. A similar, small hole appeared on the superimposed white scale shield and the tortoise shell. The red light had penetrated both of them without resistance. As for the azure essence sword shield on his body, it didn't have the slightest of effect. Upon contact with the attack, it completely dissolved without a trace. What Han Li saw caused his heart to drop. If his body wasn't nimble from his long practice with the shifting smoke steps, then his heart would have been struck and he would have died immediately. A single moment of carelessness like this could cause anyone to lose their life. The more Han Li thought of this, the greater the fear he felt. Although he knew that the Emperor of Yue had absorbed a majority of the blue-robed man's magic power, the Emperor's drastic increase in strength was far beyond his expectations. However, Han Li didn't know that as he was stricken by fear from his near-death experience, the Emperor of Yue was even more amazed that Han Li had survived his strike. Although it appeared that his last move appeared effortless to use, this blood spirit drill was actually a single-use move. Only after compressing one's true essence by several tens of times would one be able to unleash this surprise killing move. This was one of the devilish art's killing moves that he cultivated. Not only was the preparation for this unbearably painful, it also required far too much time. When the Emperor had previously used this technique, not a single cultivator had managed to survive it. But now, Han Li was merely lightly injured from it. How could he not be shocked? Only one blood spirit drill remained within his body. He hesitated, unsure whether or not to use it on Han Li once more. When the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators saw that Han Li was injured from the recent attack, their expressions vastly changed. Unconsciously, Han Li had already become their pillar of support. For him to be injured so unexpectedly greatly alarmed them. Go. Han Li spit this out without the slightest hesitation after he shifted his gaze away from his wound. He madly poured magic power into his divine wind boat and swiftly flew off to the side. When Song Meng and the others heard this, they gave each other a mutual glance before following Han Li's orders to flee. When the Emperor of Yue saw this, he was initially surprised, but then sneered soon after. He flashed forward into the air, wanting to chase after Han Li. However, he now saw that over 10 uniquely shaped puppets had surrounded him. Chapter 327, Entering the Formation. Get lost, the Emperor of Yue yelled gloomily. With a long whistle, the bloody light hurriedly enveloped the group of puppets. Then, with a savage appearance, he chased after Han Li and company, disappearing in the blink of an eye. After a short moment, the motionless puppets suddenly fell from sky. They were all broken into fragments. Han Li arrived at the great formation he had set up. Having felt his puppets being destroyed from his threads of consciousness, Han Li felt very regretful. He then called out to the other cultivators to descend and enter the small bamboo forest. As Han Li and the others hurriedly descended, the Emperor of Yue had already broken through the puppet encirclement and clearly saw Han Li and the others enter the bamboo forest. This greatly surprised and puzzled the Emperor of Yue, but he inwardly rejoiced. When he arrived above the bamboo forest and saw that Han Li and the others hadn't left, he sinisterly smiled and immediately waved his arms. A small chunk of his body's bloody light then separated itself from him. Poo-poo, the bloody light flashed and fiercely shot into the bamboo forest. Midway, it suddenly enveloped the entire bamboo forest in a huge, shining red barrier. Having seen the bloody light silently entrap the bamboo forest, the Emperor of Yue revealed a somewhat pleased expression. So long as this devilish light barrier firmly surrounded the bamboo forest, he would be able to use another secret technique to completely dissolve everything within it. Since the enemy had trapped themselves there, they had better not blame him for being merciless. His hands formed a series of dazzling movements, the incantation gestures to activate the secret technique. As he performed these gestures, the bamboo forest was suddenly covered in a blue and white dome of light that easily stopped the barrier of bloody light from further shrinking. After a moment of surprise, the Emperor of Yue's expression grew cold. As expected, that group came here for a reason. They had even laid out a formation spell here. The Emperor of Yue thought with bitter resentment. But this is nothing. How formidable can a hurriedly established formation spell be? At worst, I'll just refine the people along with their formation. In any case, I cannot allow them to flee from the imperial city. The Emperor of Yue thought resolutely. With a plan in mind, he formed incantation gestures without restraint and immediately cast secret techniques. The bloody light that had been stopped then flashed with a brilliant radiance and attempted to further pressure their spell formation. However, the bloody still had little effect. But the Emperor of Yue didn't stop there. He shallowly cut at himself with his finger, sending off another chunk of bloody light to merge with the devilish light barrier. The color of the bloody light barrier grew even deeper, faintly releasing the scent of blood. Anyone who smelled it would feel the desire to vomit. Having seen this, the Emperor of Yue appeared slightly pleased. He repeatedly formed more incantation gestures with his hands and cast a series of magic techniques toward the bloody barrier. The magic techniques shot into the barrier, causing the barrier to fiercely expand in every direction and its bloody light to become a richer crimson. The azure-white radiance bitterly resisted the increased pressure, appearing as if it would collapse at any moment. The Emperor of Yue felt at ease after seeing this. From what he currently saw, the deaths of the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators was only a matter of time, and it was impossible for them to escape. However, the aftermath would be troublesome to deal with. It seems that I can no longer act as the Emperor of Yue. I'll have to conceal my identity and start all over, the Emperor of Yue thought regretfully. As the Emperor of Yue was considering his possibilities in midair, Song Meng and the others were overwhelmed with fear inside the bamboo forest. Having heard Han Li's sound transmission, the others quickly retreated to save their lives. With confidence stemming from Han Li's display of strength, everyone had decided to trust him without discussion. But none of them had expected that they would arrive at such an obscure bamboo forest and actually be trapped within such a dangerous situation. Although a defensive formation spell was established at this location, they were surrounded by an impenetrable bloody light. In addition, this formation spell appeared to be on the verge of collapse. With imminent danger approaching, how could these people not panic? Junior Marshal Brother Han, is this the defensive preparation that you had prepared? Song Meng muttered this question without confidence. That's right, is there a problem? Han Li indifferently said, observing the circumstances before him. In an instant, Song Meng's face turned extremely pale. The faces of Zhang Wenyang and Chen Kai-Okian's senior martial brother also turned very unsightly. Only Chen Wenyang looked at Han Li with a calm appearance. A strange appearance of thoughtfulness flashed through her eyes. Han Li, if you have any other methods, please speak of them. Don't keep us in the dark. I am confident that you have other methods prepared, not just this magic formation. Chen Kai-Okian suddenly said this in a calm manner. The others were startled upon hearing this and looked at Han Li with lifted spirits. From the caution Han Li had displayed during this night, there was no way that he would have made such a foolish move. When Han Li heard this, he lowered his head in thought. He then faintly smiled to the others. Be at ease. Since I've brought my senior apprentices here, I naturally have something in mind, he said with a calm expression, before patting his storage pouch and taking out a small purple flag. The flag was densely filled with incantation symbols and appeared to be an extraordinary magic tool. Is that a formation flag? Zhang Wenyang asked with astonishment. Formation plate and flag-type magic tools were very rarely seen in the state of Yue. Senior Marshal Sister is quite knowledgeable, Han Li agreed, lightly praising his 7th senior martial sister. This greatly surprised the others and slightly strengthened their confidence. It seemed that Junior Marshal Brother Han truly did have something else prepared. Under their attentive gazes, Han Li held the small flag with both hands. The small, exquisite flag grew several times larger in the blink of an eye and faintly emitted a purple radiance. Han Li laid the formation flag flat in his hands and softly muttered an incantation, before loudly spitting out the word swiftly at the end. Whoosh! The formation flag immediately shot off and could no longer be seen. Han Li then took out 3 more identical formation flags from his bag and did the same thing, having them fly off in other directions. After doing this, Han Li coldly glanced at the sky with an almond yellow formation plate in his hands. The formation plate was unremarkable and held no light. However, Han Li then solemnly held the plate flat above his head, causing it to lightly glow. A thick beam of yellow light soared from it and into the sky, striking the azure-white light barrier. At nearly the same time, beams of gold, azure, red, and blue light shot from the sky from 4 different directions. Upon receiving the 5 pillars of light, the azure-white barrier that was on the verge of collapse immediately stabilized, and the faint sounds of ocean waves could be heard from it. The sounds above them gradually became larger and more frequent, eventually becoming the sound of unfettered thunder. Those who heard it couldn't help but feel fear. As the sounds grew louder, the appearance of the azure-white light barrier unexpectedly changed, becoming a barrier of rainbow light. Despite how the exterior red light attempted to collide with it, the new rainbow light barrier was like a reef below a stormy sea, completely unfazed. Seeing this, Song Meng and the others grew at ease and realized that Han Li's formation was rather extraordinary. It seemingly would have no problem in preserving their lives. The Emperor of Yue saw this strange scene and cast several devilish techniques in response. However, as his techniques had little effect against the colorful light beneath his red barrier, he felt that this matter was anything but good. His stern, cold face flashed with hesitation, and he wrinkled his brow. Then, he abruptly stamped his foot and had the red light flow back to him in streams of various sizes. Then, he turned his body into a ball of red light without hesitation and flew off into the sky at a speed that would leave even Han Li ashamed. Strangely, while this person flew off at great speed, he returned at even greater speed. It was unknown why he had returned despite attempting to flee. The Emperor of Yue's face revealed an expression of disbelief as he attempted to fly off another 8 times. However, he was unable to fly off more than 100 meters away each time before obediently flying in a circle and returning to his original location. By this time, the Emperor of Yue no longer appeared bewildered. Instead, his face was filled with terror. Upon seeing this, Han Li laughed coldly while the others were wide-eyed and speechless. From joy and surprise, Zhang Wenying had tightly clenched her fist, not noticing in the slightest that her long fingernails had dug into her flesh, causing her to bleed. In addition to surprise, other, more complicated emotions had also surfaced on Chen Kaioqian's face. Han Li took out his tortoise shell and white scale shield and had them revolve around his body. Lacking the time to explain the secrets of the 5 elements reversal formation, he said with a deep voice, "If anyone has a treasure talisman, use this opportunity to activate it. In a moment, we will launch a joint attack to exterminate him. Since he is already trapped in this great formation, he won't be able to quickly escape from it." Han Li's words were filled with great confidence. Chapter 328, Black Blood Saber. Han Li's confident words, along with the self-assured manner in which he sat down with his azure talisman, inspired Chen Kaioqian and Zhang Wenying to do the same. They took out red and yellow artifact seals respectively from their storage backs and silently sat down cross-legged to activate them. Chen Kaioqian's senior martial brother and Song Meng looked at each other with a bitter smile. It wasn't as if neither of them had artifact seals. Although Chen Kaioqian's senior martial brother had his deceased Dao companion's blue artifact seal, he was familiar with neither its power nor its usage. Naturally, he couldn't just take it out and recklessly use it. As for Song Meng's gray spear artifact seal, its power had been completely exhausted during the fight with the ice demon. As a result, the two could only insipidly wait for the 3 and protect them. At this moment, the Emperor of Yue realized that madly flying around like a housefly was ineffective and stayed motionless in midair. After he lowered his head and momentarily muttered to himself, he sinisterly took off the golden crown on his head and allowed his long, disheveled hair to flow in the wind and cover over half of his face. His increasingly demonic and mysterious appearance contrasted with the bloody light emitted from his body. He took in a deep breath and suddenly used a sharp fingernail to cut a cross on his wrist. Blood profusely poured out of the cut and merged with the bloody light on his body, causing it to suddenly darken, instantly turning it dark red. Although they were separated by such a large distance, the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators were still able to smell that bloody, vomit-inducing scent. Their faces slightly grimaced, but they could only bitterly continue to look on as the enemy casted his magic. Seeing that the color of his body's bloody light had finished its transformation, the Emperor of Yue opened his mouth and spat out 2 streams of red qi toward his wrist. This unknown magic technique immediately stopped the bleeding and caused the deep wound to gradually fade away. However, his complexion was greatly paled from the loss of blood. With a stern expression, he took out a dull, jet-black hilt. The hilt was only half a foot long, but it appeared extremely worn and completely unremarkable. From the way the Emperor carefully handled the object, it didn't seem to be a useless item, but rather extremely dangerous. As he rigidly stared at the hilt, he started to softly mutter an incantation. The incantation was neither loud nor easily understood, but from its slow chant, a faintly savage qi pervaded the air, which gave the others an impression of ancientness. What is he doing? As he watched this from far away, Song Ming couldn't help but ask with great surprise. I don't know, but it's likely that he's using a formidable magic technique, Chen Kaioqian's senior martial brother said with worry. He was also unable to understand the words of the incantation. Although the two didn't understand what the enemy intended, from seeing him bleed himself, they knew that the Emperor of Yue had taken desperate measures and was giving it his all. As the two restlessly watched on, the cadence of Emperor of Yue's incantation grew quicker, and that savage aura became progressively stronger. As the Emperor's eyes flashed with red light, an astonishing scene occurred. The hilt suddenly burst out into a ball-black light and floated in midair. It rose about a foot above his head before remaining motionless. The Emperor of Yue grew increasingly cautious and formed strange hand seals one after another with exceptional skill. The bloody light on his body turned into strands of blood that hurriedly flew toward the floating hilt. At the start there were only several strands of black blood, but not long after, the threads of blood proliferated, becoming 10, several tens, and finally over 100 strands of black blood. Like moths to a flame, they all flew toward the hilt. In an instant, The hilt was densely enveloped in the threads of black blood. After wriggling for a moment, the threads condensed into a large sphere of corrupt blood, thoroughly wrapping the blade handle within. If one were to carefully look at this foul blood, one would notice a strange red radiance emitting from its otherwise dark appearance, leaving a demonic impression on one's soul. When the Emperor saw this scene unfold as he formed hand seals, he revealed a happy expression. He stopped his hand seals, intending to use a different technique, but as he did so, the sphere of black blood released a blinding black light and started squirming fiercely. Then, it started to boil and expand, appearing extremely unstable. Seeing this, the Emperor's expression of joy was completely replaced with one of fear. He frantically turned his head, looking in every direction, but when the Emperor once again laid eyes on the blood sphere, his face became misshapen by uncontrollable fear. His expression immediately became full of certainty, and he spit out a few profound incantations with a soft roar. He then fiercely bit off the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of foul blood along with a chunk of his tongue toward the deformed sphere. Once the sphere of black blood absorbed this, it immediately stabilized and its dazzling radiance dimmed. Still uneasy, the Emperor of Yue formed over 10 rapid incantation gestures in a blur, leaving him out of breath. As a result, every bit of radiance from the blood sphere had disappeared. Then the Emperor finally let out a breath of relief. However, having previously spit out blood essence, his appearance had suddenly aged over 10 years, becoming extremely haggard. Despite that, he was currently unable to attend to this issue. Instead, he suddenly cut off a chunk of his body's bloody light and sent it over to the bloody sphere. At the same time, he chanted once more in a deep voice, but because he no longer had the tip of his tongue, his words were unclear. The sphere of black blood gradually grew longer. Eventually, when the incantation was complete, the jet-black hilt appeared once more with a blade created from black blood as its saber's edge. This newly formed saber emitted an astonishingly bloody chi. Upon seeing this saber, the Emperor of Yue appeared to become mad with passion. Without further hesitation, he reached out to grab the handle of this saber and casually waved it. Although he didn't reveal the slightest bit of its might, he still appeared to be extremely satisfied with it. After taking a deep look at the saber, the Emperor of Yue let out a long, sharp whistle, turning himself into a huge sphere of black light along with the saber. After which, he suddenly charged toward the bamboo forest, causing Song Meng and company to feel greatly nervous. But at that moment, Han Li opened his eyes and stared at the oncoming blood sphere with a cold gaze. Although Han Li had been activating his artifact seal a moment ago, he had a clear understanding of his enemy's actions from his formidable spiritual sense. Previously, as the black blood saber had been taking form, Han Li's wandering spiritual sense had been strongly sucked in by the blade, which wanted to completely absorb it. With great fright, Han Li hastily withdrew his spiritual sense. Fortunately, the black blade's attempt to absorb his spiritual sense was autonomous and wasn't the doing of the Emperor of Yue. Thus, he was able to easily retrieve his spiritual sense from the black blade's grasp. Still, this fearful event had left Han Li drenched in cold sweat. If his spiritual sense had truly been absorbed by that evil saber, the consequences would be unspeakable. Although Han Li knew how fearsome the saber currently was, he remained completely confident in the strength of this hurriedly established, 5-element reversal formation. After all, even Lei Wan, a core formation cultivator, said that it would be difficult to break through his original 5-element reversal formation. Even without completely setting up this upgraded, stronger version of the formation, he was completely confident that a foundation establishment cultivator would be unable to break through it in a short amount of time. Thus, although he had opened his eyes, his heart remained completely at ease. As these thoughts churned through Han Li's mind, the Emperor of Yue knocked against the multicolored barrier of light with great force. Zizi, the rainbow light barrier easily resisted the attacks. The Emperor of Yue had expected this and evilly grinned. He then tightly grasped the black blood saber in his hand and fiercely slashed at the rainbow light barrier. With a sharp whistle, a huge streak of black radiance surged from the saber. Swoosh! The astonishing black saber streak, which was over 30 meters long, had chopped off a large portion of the rainbow light, creating a 3-meter wide gap. When the Emperor saw this, he felt great joy and charged toward the gap without the slightest hesitation. With the incessantly flickering black streak in hand, he had actually entered the rainbow light. No, this is far from good, Song Meng immediately cried out in panic. Although the other idol's senior martial brother didn't speak, he appeared far from okay, with an expression filled with worry. There is no need to be alarmed. That rainbow light is only the first layer of defense. This great formation isn't so easily broken. Having heard Han Li's indifferent voice, the pair calmed down and faintly smiled. Still, they were both greatly astonished that this junior martial brother Han had enough leftover concentration, while activating his artifact seal, to pay attention to their conversation. How truly amazing! The Emperor of Yue had immediately charged over 30 meters into the barrier of rainbow light, and had clearly seen the yellow Maple Valley cultivators beneath him. He was able to vividly see Han Li and two others activating their artifact seals. He smiled sinisterly and flashed over 10 meters, appearing over where Han Li sat. With a light wave of his black blood saber, a black saber streak over 30 meters long chopped down. Chapter 329, Exterminating the Enemy. When Song Meng and company saw the Emperor of Yue attack the cross-legged Han Li, their hearts grew shocked. Although they were aware of their inability to affect the saber's attack, Song Meng and company still raised their arms in defiance. In hopes of slowing down the attack, they unleashed a torrent of fireballs and threw 8 talismans which transformed into huge stones. Unfortunately, their attacks were of no effect. With a light swing, they were easily swept away by the saber's huge radiance and had completely vanished without a trace. The saber streak changed direction once more and fiercely chopped down with vicious intent. As Han Li saw the sharp saber streak about to strike him, his expression didn't change except for forming a slight sneer. When the Emperor of Yue saw that Han Li was so calm, he was startled for a moment. Without thinking much more, he continued chopping down with the saber streak. The Emperor struck at thin air, as Han Li had suddenly disappeared. He discovered that he had returned to his original position at an unknown time, about 100 meters above the barrier of rainbow light. The Emperor of Yue's appearance became extremely unsightly, and he struck at the rainbow light while clenching his teeth. As the Emperor split open a hole and charged in, he saw Han Li indifferently gazing at him while still seated in his original position. This time, the Emperor of Yue didn't impulsively charge down. Instead, his entire body trembled, shooting out a huge beam of bloody light with astonishing momentum. He immediately followed this up with a black saber streak. Since the Emperor of Yue had prepared himself, he was able to clearly observe what followed. When the bloody light was about 3 meters away from Han Li's head, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had been swallowed by something. At that same moment, he felt his devilish light suddenly return to its original location above him. The Emperor of Yue was astonished. Naturally, his following strike wasn't effective in the slightest. Once again, he was outside and high above the rainbow light. The Emperor's face turned pale, revealing panic for the first time. He no longer charged downward, and instead continuously waved the demonic black blood saber. Endless streaks of crescent saber light flew in every direction in an attempt to break through the formation. Not long after the saber streaks flew off, a flash of white light caused the attacks to shoot back towards their original location. He was flustered for a moment before furiously continuing his incisive attacks. If the Emperor of Yue had been able to escape formation, he would have believed it contained a mere illusion technique and wouldn't have felt so anxious. If this were the case, he could easily break through this minor formation by relying on his devilish arts. But now that he was being teleported and his formidable attacks were being bounced back, he felt his heart plummet. Only great formation spells known as the Great Unbreakable Formations would have this type of restriction. Already perturbed by this abysmal turn of events, the Emperor of Yue felt a powerful surge of spiritual chi from the rainbow light barrier below him, causing his heart to tremble. He tightened his grip on the black saber and his bloody light hastily revolved around him, enveloping him in an impenetrable, blood-red whirlwind. Another 2 equivalently powerful spiritual pressures surged from within the rainbow light. Soon after, the rainbow light hummed for a moment and opened a 3-meter-wide passage. A dense cloud of small azure rods swarmed through the passage and rushed toward the Emperor of Yue in a grand torrent. These rods were from the azure rod artifact seal Han Li had just activated. Closely following the cloud of rods, a small blazing sword and a yellow crystal ball flew out. After the 2 exited the passage, they underwent a strange transformation. The small red sword grew incredibly large, and the crystal ball emitted a blinding yellow light. Under Chen Kaioqian's and Zhang Wenyang's control, the 2 artifact seals silently split into different directions, attempting to flank the Emperor. As he watched these events unfold, the Emperor's face grew ashen. He madly flourished the black blood saber in his hand and shot out 8 huge saber streaks from within the whirlwind. With a sharp crackle of explosions, a majority of the small rods smashed into pieces upon meeting the attack. Han Li's face turned slightly white. Because his mind was connected to the rods created by the artifact seal, he had suffered damage from the strikes. This blood saber was powerful beyond expectation, but fortunately for Han Li, he didn't have to forcefully defend against its blows. As for the Emperor of Yue, he was currently making his last stand. Even with the obstruction of the saber streaks, the small red sword, the yellow crystal ball, and the remaining swarm of azure rods were able to seize an opportunity to charge into the bloody wind. A storm of sharp whistles immediately rose from within the whirlwind as countless bursts of azure, red and yellow radiance surged against the black streak in confrontation. It was clear that the struggle within was incomparably intense. Suddenly, an abrupt yell of fury burst forth, accompanied by the sound of an explosion. The black, red, and yellow streaks of light all violently flashed for a moment before completely disappearing from the blood-red whirlwind. At that same moment, the complexions of Chen Kai-Okian and Zhang Wenying paled and their eyes became spiritless. "Seventh Junior Martial Sister, are you all right?" When Song Meng saw this, he hastily asked with concern. "It's nothing. His blood saber is just truly demonic. It was actually able to take down Mai and Zhang Wenying's artifact seals in mutual destruction. Now we will have to see whether or not Junior Martial Brother Han's artifact seal will be able to kill him," Chen Kai-Okian softly said. She took out 2 blue medicine pills, swallowing one and handing the other to Zhang Wenying. "Your artifact seals were destroyed." When the other Yellow Maple Valley cultivators heard this, their expressions became astonished. In their minds, only magic treasures should be able to contest with artifact seals. "Impressive. I suspect our enemy's demonic saber is actually a ruined fragment of some kind of magic treasure." After Zhang Wenying swallowed the pill, her face became flushed and her lips reddened. "The ruined fragment of a magic treasure. How is that possible?" Chen Kai-Oking asked with astonishment. A series of earth-trembling booms suddenly rang out from above them, causing them to hastily look up in surprise. Separated by a thin layer of rainbow light, a great battle consisting of dazzling, chaotic bursts of azure and blood-red light was occurring above them. After a short moment, the bloody light greatly lessened and was thoroughly overwhelmed by the azure light. Afterwards, all traces of light had gradually disappeared, revealing the Emperor of Yue standing upright. His face had a vacant expression, and his lips were trembling much like a piece of porcelain about to collapse. The Emperor fell straight from the sky without resistance and softly landed on the rainbow light above them, his body nothing more than a pile of crushed flesh. Having seen this, all of Han Li's fellow sect members were rapt with joy. Song Meng even went over to Han Li and excitedly yelled, "Junior Martial Brother Han, you've killed that monster. I knew you could do it." I released the entirety of my artifact seal's strength in a single instance to break through his bloody light. Otherwise, it might have taken quite a while. Han Li faintly smiled and spoke with a content tone. Being able to draw out such a great amount of an artifact seal's might in a single instance wasn't something that everyone could do. Only after using and seeing so many distinct artifact talismans did Han Li receive the experience to do this. Although such an incisive method to take down the enemy greatly decreased the number of uses for an artifact seal, its power would explosively increase. Such a method proved extremely effective against powerful enemies. Han Li had just comprehended this method a few days ago and was able to use this technique when it was least expected. As a result, he was able to deal the finishing blow to his heavily injured enemy. Naturally, this artifact seal was fully consumed in the process and turned to ash. At this moment, those fire element's blood cores were at the forefront of his mind. After saying a few words to Song Meng, he released 2 puppet beasts without any hesitation and had them directly head over to the Emperor of Yue's corpse. When the others saw this, they didn't mind in the least. After all, the death of this enemy was almost entirely due to Han Li. Naturally, no one would fight Han Li over the spoils. Zhang Wenying unexpectedly appeared somewhat pleased after seeing her sweetheart avenged, and repeatedly expressed her thanks to Han Li. She also said that, when the fallen hear of this in the underworld, they would certainly be grateful that Han Li had avenged them. Those words caused Han Li, who had come here with another objective in mind, to feel a bit embarrassed. He hastily changed the subject and suggested that the others hurriedly search other areas of the Imperial Palace for any Black School Fiend disciples that remained hidden. He also said that he had to stay behind and attend to a few matters, such as withdrawing the Great Formation. Hearing Han Li's words, how could the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators not understand what he had meant? He was clearly giving them the opportunity to loot the remains of the Black Fiend School's nest. Song Ming beamed with happiness while the others found it somewhat embarrassing. Han Li then said, "Let's rendezvous after I finish putting everything in order. As for the Black Fiend School Master, he should have enough high-quality items on his body to satisfy me." The others felt this was reasonable and did not further refuse. After all, everyone had suffered quite a bit from today's great battle. Thus, after Han Li withdrew the Great Formation, the others flew away on their magic tools. Only when the others could no longer be seen did Han Li feel reassured enough to wave his two puppet beasts over. They flew back toward Han Li with the results of their search. Chapter 330, Fiend Core. When Han Li saw that the 5-element blood cores were among the Emperor's items, he was jubilant. He immediately took them from the puppet beast's mouth and closely examined them. From the great spiritual power contained in the cores, Han Li verified that their medicinal properties were genuine. Relieved, Han Li took out an exquisite jade box from his storage pouch and carefully placed the 5 blood cores inside. Han Li didn't know the specific effects of the 5 elements blood cores mentioned by the young Prince Xin, but from how urgently the Emperor of Yue had collected these items, their usefulness toward core formation should most likely be true. Han Li then shifted his attention to the other items, a pitch-black alms bowl, an awl with an inch-long, blood-red spike, and a jade slip emitting a light gray chi. Upon seeing these items, Han Li felt somewhat fearful of them. These kinds of magic tools were commonly used by devilish and evil cultivators. It was likely that such items would have restrictions or curses placed on them, so he wasn't in any hurry to fiddle with them. Instead, he took in a deep breath and covered his hands in a layer of faint azure light. With this protection, Han Li was able to pick up the jade slip with his heart at ease and carefully examine it. Apart from releasing a strange aura, the jade slip didn't have any sort of obvious restrictions. Han Li let out a sigh of relief and slowly submerged his spiritual sense into the slip. As his spiritual sense entered the jade slip, Han Li stood motionless. However, his expression underwent strange changes. First, he appeared pleasantly surprised, then dismayed, and finally, extremely cautious with a slight trace of fear. After the time it took to make a cup of tea, Han Li withdrew his spiritual sense and found himself in a daze. The jade slip's contents went far beyond Han Li's expectations. It contained information on all of the Black Fiend School's cultivation arts, such as the young prince's Black Fiend Usra art, the 4-blood servant's Fiend Demon art, the Emperor of Yue's Divine Blood Light, and so on. Han Li was shocked to discover that all of these cultivation arts mentioned a book called the Profound Yin Scriptures. It seemed to be the origin of all these arts. This greatly piqued Han Li's curiosity. But as Han Li hurriedly scoured the jade slip, he was unable to find anything related to the whereabouts of the scripture. With no other choice, Han Li could only bury his desire to find the scripture in his heart and focus his attention to some of the strange secret techniques. A few of these greatly pleased Han Li. Not only did they resolve some of his long-held doubts, but they also mentioned the true use of the 5 elements blood cores. Han Li calmed himself and carefully examined the passage. It turned out that the 5 elements blood cores were formed within the bodies of cultivators who practiced the Fiend Demon art, much like how a demonic beast condenses a core within their body. It was the most important aspect of the Fiend Demon art. The reason as to why they were able to turn into fiend demons and didn't need to use Foundation Establishment pills to enter Foundation Establishment was because of the formation of this core. Although this Fiend Demon art didn't require the use of blood sacrifices, it still greatly increased the speed of cultivation. However, Foundation Establishment was the highest layer this cultivation art could achieve. There would be no hope of reaching core formation. In fact, the rest of these cultivation techniques were more or less the same, and held the fatal flaw of being incapable of reaching core formation. Of course, their speed of cultivation left others astonished through the additional assistance of blood sacrifices. It seems these 5 elements blood cores were supposed to be a solution to the defects of these kinds of cultivation arts. The jade slip also mentioned a secret technique called the Fiend Core Technique. According to what was stated by the secret technique, even if one were a late Foundation Establishment cultivator with poor aptitude, so long as they consumed the 5 elements blood cores, In accordance with the technique, there was a 1/3 chance of forming a fiend core. This false gold core would be similar to a genuine core formation cultivator's gold core. With the successful formation of a fiend core, while one's strength would be inferior to a genuine core formation cultivator, the difference wouldn't be that great. In addition, it would have the wondrous effect of extending one's lifespan similar to genuine core formation. When Han Li read this, his heart nearly jumped out of his chest. A 1/3 chance of forming a core, the 5 elements blood core, was truly heaven-defying. He immediately felt an urge to set everything else aside and consume the 5 elements blood cores. However, a flaw later mentioned in the description of the secret technique had left Han Li astonished. Since the fiend core was an artificial golden core, there was no possibility of further improvement. This implied that for the rest of one's lifetime, there would be no way to further one's cultivation and progress past early core formation stage. If it were only this, Han Li still wouldn't allow such an opportunity to pass him by. This was because the method, the 3 essence revolutions technique, used to form a core was truly unpredictable and unreliable. Even if he were able to scatter his cultivation 3 times, Han Li wasn't confident it would work. After all, this cultivation method was something created from the mere conjectures of the founder of the Azure Essence sword art. No one had ever successfully cultivated it before. On the other hand, from the tone of this text, the fiend core technique was certain to have previously been used. A 1/3 possibility of core formation was extremely enticing to Han Li. As for the inability to reach nascent soul stage after forming a fiend core, this matter was too far removed from Han Li's current situation for him to consider. Nascent soul stage was still something Han Li could only dream about. At the moment, being able to achieve core formation was his highest objective. As for whether or not he could extravagantly hope to condense a nascent soul, he would only think about it after he reached core formation. But the following details of the fiend core technique left Han Li dumbstruck. It said that after the fiend core was formed in one's body, fiend demon chi would be continuously released for a long period, and it would be capable of gradually eroding a cultivator's mind. Although the erosion wouldn't leave one completely without mind or memories, decreased mental acuity along with gradually reduced intellect were unavoidable. This caused Han Li's heart to tremble without end. What Han Li was most confident of was his mind and quick-wittedness. These were the main reasons that he had been able to remain so free and unfettered in the cultivation world until now. Thus, when he read that passage, Han Li had only a moment of internal struggle before completely severing any intentions of using the 5 elements blood cores. After reading about the drawback, Han Li was extremely vexed. He had done so much to acquire the 5 elements blood cores, but it proved to be of absolutely no use to him. After a moment of further consideration, Han Li felt that something was amiss. If the drawback was so severe, then why would the Emperor of Yue specially cultivate these cores? That cunning old fox certainly wasn't going to directly consume it. With that thought, Han Li looked through the secret techniques once more, and his attention was caught by a very interesting secret technique, external reincarnation. This was a renowned top-grade secret technique of the devilish Tao. Han Li had heard about it long ago. Although there were many techniques called reincarnation techniques, the specific cultivation method and effectiveness of these techniques were exceedingly strange and varied. Regardless of the reincarnation technique, to a devil Tao cultivator, they were all as precious as their own lives. They were all fundamentally the greatest secrets of each sect. The 7 sects of Yue had previously attempted to collect all the cultivation arts related to reincarnation, but ultimately ended up empty-handed. Han Li quickly read through this technique several times and grew rapt with joy. He had found a use for these 5 elements blood cores after all. If he had guessed correctly, the Emperor of Yue must have had the same plan in mind. Thus, he had painstakingly cultivated those blood servants in order to condense those 5 elements blood cores. As for the blue-robed man, the self-proclaimed Black Fiend schoolmaster who had died from the heavenly lightning seed, that was an incarnation he had refined. Only that would explain why the blue-robed man was completely willing to allow his cultivation to be absorbed without the slightest resistance. The distracting thoughts that Han Li had pushed to the back of his mind resurfaced as he read through the secret technique. As for secret techniques such as the cultivation essence pill and methods of blood sacrifice, since Han Li didn't cultivate devilish arts, he had little interest in them. Only the condensation method of the blood spirit drill caught Han Li's eye as he read on. He read through it several times and memorized it. After Han Li withdrew his consciousness from the Jade slip, he properly digested the information before moving on to the next two items. The blood red awl was the solidified form of the blood spirit drill after leaving the body. It should be quite a useful magic tool. As for the pitch-black alms bowl, it must have been the rarely seen magic tool, the soul congregation bowl. It was specialized in holding the souls of cultivators. Any soul that entered this magic tool would gradually lose its intelligence and become a feral, common soul suitable for refinement or control. After only briefly examining this soul congregation bowl, the dark, cold chi that the bowl contained caused Han Li to shiver, and he hastily deposited it into his storage pouch. The magic tool's dark, cold chi gave an impression that countless cultivators' souls must have been ruined within. The more he made contact with this bowl, the more ill he felt. Han Li clearly understood that without cultivating these kinds of dark arts, he would have no use for this magic tool. The more he made contact with this bowl, the more ill he felt.